Chapter 641, Thief Hero. In the heart of Poland, within the confines of the Johnny Silverhand store, Tang Mi fixed his gaze on the intruder who had dared to sneak in. It was baffling to witness the audacity of the thief. Instead of displaying fear upon being caught, he held his head high with an air of pride. Tang Mi couldn't help but sneer at the foolishness of attempting to steal from Silverhand, a place never short of protective measures and willing defenders. He glanced over at the two employees present in the store and inquired with a tone of indifference, "How did you manage to enter? It seems you've been here before." Johnny Silverhands is protected by anti-theft enchantments, which can only be bypassed if someone willingly opens the door for you. Approaching the man, who was now kneeling on the ground and restrained by werewolf security guards, Tang Mi leaned down and taunted, "Perhaps if you explain yourself, I might just forgive you." The man responded with a laugh, struggling against his captor's grip, only to be firmly held down. He spat out defiantly, looking Tang Mi in the eye with a cold stare, and declared, "It's the capital of the rich and heartless." Dodging the spit, Tang Mi gave the man a light glance, then swiftly slapped him across the face. The impact sent teeth flying, mixed with blood, as the man glared back at Tang Mi with venomous hatred. "What did he take?" Tang Mi casually turned to ask the other employees. He took items from the G series, along with a considerable amount of food, one employee responded. "Food?" Tang Mi expressed his surprise, turning back to the man. "I never imagined someone would come to Silverhands specifically to steal food." The man remained silent, closing his eyes as if resigning himself to whatever punishment Tang Mi decided. After a moment of contemplation, Tang Mi commanded, "Take him to the Ministry of Magic. Let the Aurors handle this." Under different circumstances, Tang Mi might have dealt with the thief personally. However, on foreign soil, he preferred to let the local authorities resolve the issue. Besides, it was just one thief, and the stolen goods could be recovered. The security team escorted the man out, but their return was quicker than expected. "What's the matter?" Tang Mi asked, puzzled by their swift return. One of the guards offered a wry smile and suggested, "Take a look outside." With a serious expression, Tang Mi stepped outside, only to find the perimeter of Johnny Silverhand completely surrounded by a large group of Polish wizards, preventing anyone from leaving. "What is this about?" Tang Mi wondered aloud, then decided, "Take him away." As he stepped outside, he was met with the angry faces of the crowd. "Bring back our hero," someone shouted, stirring the crowd into a noisy and chaotic state. Tang Mi was perplexed, unable to comprehend when he had antagonized their hero. Yet, the release of the thief only fueled the crowd's anger further. "You can't do this. Let Diwala go, you savage outlander. Down with the capital." The crowd's fury escalated, hurling objects at Johnny Silverhand. With a darkened expression, Tang Mi drew his wand, an action that inadvertently heightened the tension. Blocking the incoming projectiles, he cast a sonorous spell to amplify his voice, announcing, "This man was caught stealing from Johnny Silverhand. Please make way." "No, we're not going anywhere." The crowd's response was a tumultuous uproar, forcing Tang Mi to retreat step by step back into the store. His expression clouded with confusion. Tang Mi pondered, "What has happened?" The welcoming attitude he had previously encountered had vanished, replaced by hostility. Something significant must have occurred unbeknownst to him, and he was determined to uncover the truth. After persistent inquiries, the truth finally emerged. The man, who had been pilfering from Johnny Silverhand for days, had been distributing his stolen goods to impoverished wizards without seeking anything in return. To the Polish wizards, he was nothing short of a hero. The news of Johnny Silverhand apprehending the man had spread, inciting anger among the Polish wizarding community. They were outraged that their hero had been taken from them, manipulated by the capital's greed. Someone is orchestrating this from behind the scenes, Tang Mi realized, feeling troubled. In his eyes, he was the victim, yet to the Polish wizards, he was perceived as the oppressor. In their narrative, theft was glorified as an act of justice, and the victim was vilified. What kind of logic is this? Tang Mi muttered under his breath, cursing the twisted turn of events. Tang Mi found himself in a precarious situation. He was faced with a choice: either release the man in his custody or hand him over to the Ministry of Magic. However, neither option was ideal. Releasing the man would only embolden those who already saw him as an oppressor, reinforcing the belief that they could act with impunity. On the other hand, refusing to release the man would not deter the wizard's determination. It was a no-win scenario, further complicated by what Tang Mi perceived as a sinister plot. The image of the Minister of Magic flashed in Tang Mi's mind, signaling the Ministry's inevitable counteraction. He was certain that the Ministry was aware of the situation and that the capture of the man was not without reason. Suddenly, a security guard burst in, panic etched on his face. "Mr. Shelby, there's a mob outside attacking Johnny Silverhand," he exclaimed. The crowd outside was in a frenzy, hurling insults and stones over the closed gate, demanding the release of their perceived hero. Despite the chaos, Tang Mi remained composed. He instructed a clerk to inform the Ministry of Magic about the attack. Shortly after, representatives from the Ministry's picket section arrived, declaring their intent to protect the crowd. Tang Mi couldn't help but feel a sense of irony at their words, considering Johnny Silverhand had been the victim from the start. As Tang Mi stepped outside, he was greeted by several aurors, including a tall one who introduced himself as Star Rosier. Tang Mi, puzzled by the situation, questioned why a thief was being hailed as a hero. Star admitted to a misunderstanding, but the conversation was cut short when someone from the crowd threw a stone at Tang Mi. Star immediately intervened, warning the crowd against further aggression. Star then apologized to Tang Mi, explaining that Dewara had entered Johnny Silverhand's property without permission and caused trouble. Tang Mi corrected him, emphasizing that Dewara had not just trespassed, but had stolen from Johnny Silverhand, resulting in significant property damage. Star assured Tang Mi that they would handle the situation and provide a satisfactory resolution. However, the crowd's reaction to this promise was overwhelmingly negative. Tang Mi, wanting to defuse the situation, signaled for the security guard to bring out Dewara. The sight of Dewara's bruised face incited further outrage among the crowd. Star took charge, announcing that Dewara would be escorted to prison for the damage he caused. He then turned to Tang Mi, seeking his approval. Tang Mi, maintaining his composure, expressed his hope for justice. As the aurors escorted Dewara away, a moment of deception unfolded. In a quiet alley, they whispered to Dewara to run, facilitating his escape. The crowd, witnessing this, erupted in cheers, while the aurors feigned an attempt to pursue him before admitting his escape. Star, feigning disappointment in his subordinates, apologized to Tang Mi for their incompetence. However, in a low voice meant only for Tang Mi, Star chuckled, revealing the true nature of their actions. This moment underscored the complexity and duplicity within the Ministry of Magic, leaving Tang Mi to ponder the true extent of justice in a world rife with manipulation and deceit. Tang Mi quickly realized that the Ministry of Magic was behind the entire ordeal from start to finish. The wizards who had caused trouble for Johnny Silverhand went unpunished, further fueling her suspicions. Days later, an incident occurred that escalated the situation dramatically. Johnny Silverhand's establishment was besieged once again, but this time, the catalyst was a piece of shocking news. Tang Mi couldn't help but curse out loud, "Nonsense!" Dewara, a known figure, was found dead in his own home. Those who had been negatively affected by his actions immediately suspected Silverhand's involvement. The situation worsened when a witness claimed to have seen two of Silverhand's employees near Dewara's residence around the time of his death. This accusation painted Silverhand and his team as villains in the eyes of the public, who believed they were responsible for the death of a civilian. The community's outrage reached a boiling point. In a symbolic act of protest, someone hurled a stone through Silverhand's window, shattering the glass. This act of defiance was quickly followed by more stones, each one thrown with anger and a demand for justice. The air was filled with shouts of condemnation, with one voice standing out, "Coward, come out if you dare!" As the glass windows of Silverhand's establishment continued to break under the relentless assault, Tang Mi understood that this was more than just a spontaneous outburst of anger. It was a calculated move by someone with a hidden agenda. To add insult to injury, Star, in a display of sheer hypocrisy, sent a letter inquiring whether the Ministry of Magic should intervene to quell the unrest. The audacity of the suggestion, given the ministry's likely involvement in the escalation of the situation, infuriated Tang Mi. In a fit of anger, she crumpled the letter into a ball. The events unfolding were not just a simple case of public outrage. They were indicative of a deeper, more sinister plot, and Tang Mi was determined to uncover the truth behind it. Chapter 642, Money and Ideals. How does one fool a group of people? It's quite simple. First, make them aware of their own modest circumstances, and then show them others enjoying privileges they can't access. This disparity often leads to desperation. Is a hero merely a thief who steals from others, now celebrated for robbing the rich to aid the poor? Without concrete evidence, only unreliable testimonies circulate. Yet they dared to confront Johnny the Silver Hand, fueled by their perceived status as the downtrodden deserving of assistance. Why, they argue, we are the underprivileged. We are entitled to help. You, with your silver hand, symbolize wealth and power. You possess riches we lack, so it's only right that you share. He merely took something trivial from you. How can you respond so harshly? We are the champions of justice. While others may fear your wealth, we stand undaunted. There's a peculiar satisfaction in committing acts under the guise of justice. The exhilaration of challenging authority grants them a sense of heroism. When John received the letter detailing the incident with Johnny the Silver Hand, headlines had already spread across the papers. Silver Hand's true face, slaying the hero who saves civilians. Waterloo for the first time. Silver Hand's capital fails to intervene. Polish citizens protest en masse. Poland upholds the virtue of altruism. Johnny the Silver Hand attacked, his assailant revealed. John's expression darkened as he read. It seems this holiday won't be peaceful, he mused, his eyes narrowing while his fingers traced the rough texture of the paper. This was clearly a counterattack, akin to exploiting a crack that John had once pried open with money. The incident was used to convey a message. Ideals can drive people to extremes. This was a clash between capital and ideals, painting the Silver Hand as villainous. A clever strategy for a thief, John remarked with a smile. It seemed everyone had forgotten that the so-called hero was actually a thief who had broken into shops. Because he stole food, his other thefts, including the G series products, were overlooked. People only see what they choose to. The incident not only affected Barty Crouch Sr., but also reignited public debate. The Polish Ministry of Magic intervened to quell the outcry. Minister of Magic, Inning, made a public statement. I have faith in Silver Hand and in Mr. Crouch. The ministry will thoroughly investigate Dwara's death. Only a figure as respected as the minister could pacify the Polish populace. However, Silver Hand found itself paralyzed, unable to contribute to Poland's economy as it had intended, a first for the organization. Despite the minister's proclaimed belief, his reserved demeanor sparked speculation. Had Silver Hand's influence in its host country become too pervasive? It was now John's turn to respond. 3 days after the incident, Silver Hand resumed operations, met with derision from Polish wizards who mocked its optimistic aspirations. Then a newspaper appeared from nowhere, catching a wizard's attention. A comprehensive analysis of the Silver Hand incident in Poland, the Little Wizard Fund. The headline read, Silver Hand might be an unfamiliar name abroad, but here it represents a beacon of generosity, the article began. Since its inception, Silver Hand had established the Little Wizard Fund, conceived from John Wick's compassion for the afflicted. The fund initially provided free wolfsbane potions to underage werewolves, expanding over time to support broader initiatives. It now subsidized Hogwarts wizarding education, offering incoming freshmen school supplies at rates significantly below market price. Moreover, for young wizards facing familial hardships, the Little Wizard Foundation has been a beacon of hope for those struggling to afford their education. It has significantly reduced the persecution of young wizards by providing financial assistance until the completion of their studies. In a notable act of compassion, Silver Hand expressed regret for past events in Poland, ensuring every young Polish wizard was escorted safely and even establishing a school for their use. However, the foundation recently faced a setback when it was discovered that funds were being stolen. The culprit was apprehended and handed over to the Ministry of Magic, but the incident was kept under wraps to avoid public panic. The news of the Little Wizard Fund's existence and its recent theft spread rapidly, capturing the attention of the wizarding community. The Foundation's efforts in funding schools and curing curses were well known, and the theft was seen as a direct attack on the future of young Polish wizards. While some were skeptical of the news, others were deeply concerned. One afternoon, a young wizard, burdened by poverty and feeling inferior, hesitantly approached the Johnny Silverhand office to inquire about the Little Wizard Fund. The kind receptionist directed him to the appropriate window, where he received a modest sum of galleons and a special Little Wizard card that offered discounts and could not be duplicated or forged. The experience felt surreal to him, and he quickly shared the news with his friends, encouraging them to apply as well. Word of the fund and its benefits spread like wildfire among wizarding families in Poland, igniting hope for a better life for their children. The aftermath of war had widened the gap between the rich and the poor, but the Little Wizard Fund offered a glimmer of hope for the less fortunate. In a surprising turn of events, those who had previously vandalized the Johnny Silverhand store returned under the cover of night to clean up their mess. By morning, the storefront was immaculate, standing in stark contrast to its surroundings. This act of contrition confused many who had been skeptical of Silverhand's intentions, as the tangible benefits of the fund became undeniable. The controversy surrounding Dawala's death began to fade into the background, as discussions about heroes were deliberately avoided. John's strategy was clear. He wanted to demonstrate that Dawala's actions were not beneficial, but rather detrimental to the community. He argued that immediate benefits, such as financial assistance, were more valuable than distant ideals, which often left people hungry and disillusioned. John's approach was pragmatic. He believed that while adults might endure hunger for the sake of their ideals, children could not understand such sacrifices. The immediate needs of the young wizards were paramount, and by addressing these needs, John aimed to show that opposing Silverhand was tantamount to jeopardizing the future of the young wizards. Leaving a newspaper at Wick's house, John made his stance clear. If those fighting for ideals could distort facts, he could use his wealth to present his version of the truth. He viewed money as a tool, not something to be hoarded. For John, the true value of wealth lay in its ability to solve problems and improve lives, not in accumulating it for its own sake. Considering the situation, John found himself pondering the power of money. He thought about those fighters who, driven by their ideals, would rather face starvation than utter a single, disparaging word about those with wealth. As he rubbed his chin thoughtfully, a realization dawned on him. "Why do I feel like the villain here?" he mused. The scenario unfolding before him resembled a classic confrontation against the establishment, where the figurehead of wealth attempts to quell dissent by purchasing the loyalty of those whose convictions are easily swayed. John couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of his thoughts. The complexity of the situation was not lost on him. It was a stark reminder of how easily the lines between right and wrong could blur, especially when money entered the equation. He understood that the allure of financial gain could tempt even the most steadfast individuals, challenging their principles and sometimes leading them astray. This moment of introspection was a turning point for John. It forced him to confront the uncomfortable truth about the role he played in this narrative. Was he merely a bystander, or was he inadvertently contributing to the very system he questioned? The laughter that had escaped him was tinged with a hint of self-awareness, as he recognized the complexity of human nature and the moral dilemmas that often accompanied it. Chapter 643, Wizards' Hidden Havens. In an era when wizards were frequently hunted, they established numerous secret havens for their kind. A young man arrived at one such gathering place, navigating a small boat along the river. With a hood shadowing his features and an air of indifference, he secured the boat and stepped ashore. "Ah, it's you again?" greeted an elderly wizard, a pipe clenched between his teeth, his eyes crinkling in a smile. "What are you looking to purchase today?" Surveying the bustling street, where many faces greeted him with smiles, the young man produced a list. "I need some provisions," he stated, scanning the list. "Additionally, I require some right front paw nails and white meat from the cat Lizzie." The old wizard took the list, muttering under his breath as he read it. The young man, impatient, snatched the list back and turned to leave. "Wait, I can get it for you," the old man called out hastily, seeing the young man's retreating back. "Others might not have it, but I can manage." The young man paused, his tone icy. "Many are willing to do the business you refuse." Sighing, the old wizard conceded. "All right, old rules then. Come back in the afternoon to pick it up." With a nod, the young man continued on his way. Once he was out of sight, the old wizard chuckled to himself. "Fool doesn't know everything he needs is sold at Silver Hands." He then called over his grandson, who was studying nearby, and handed him the list along with a little wizard card. "Go to Silver Hand and buy these," he instructed, despite the boy's protest that the money was meant for his education. "Go," the grandfather insisted sternly. "What's the use of studying when money speaks louder? Earn more, and we can live comfortably." This had become a routine ever since Silver Hand introduced the little wizard card. The grandfather would send his grandson to buy items at a discount, then sell them for a profit, keeping the business secret between them. At Silver Hand, the grandson, following the list, found most items easily. However, acquiring the cat Lizzie's right paw nails proved challenging, as they were seldom sold in potion shops. Approaching a clerk hesitantly, he inquired about the nails. Recognizing the boy, the clerk directed him to the alchemy materials section, noting his frequent purchases. After the boy hurried off, the clerk reported his suspicions to Tang Mi, the store manager, suggesting someone might be exploiting the little wizard card for profit. Intrigued, Tang Mi decided to follow the boy to the alchemy material area, where he stood out among the mostly adult patrons. The boy struggled to reach the cat Lizzie's nails, placed high on a shelf. After several failed attempts, he grew frustrated. At that moment, Tang Mi approached, effortlessly retrieving the nail for the boy. Tang Mi, with a flick of his right paw, glanced at the young boy and inquired, "Do you want this?" Overflowing with gratitude, the boy repeatedly thanked him. "Thank you so much." Just as he reached out to take it, Tang Mi pulled his hand back, adopting a tone of concern. "This is a rarely used alchemy material. Are you sure you haven't made a mistake?" Confused, the boy hastily retrieved his list to double-check. Seizing the moment, Tang Mi snatched the list from the boy's hands, causing him to startle and attempt to reclaim it. "Bai Shan, Mao Lizi's right paw nail?" Tang Mi mused aloud as he scanned the shopping list. Besides these items, the list included various materials for treating wounds and an assortment of peculiar food requests. Some of the food items were perishable, and the quantities listed were insufficient for a child's consumption. After memorizing the list, Tang Mi feigned sympathy towards the anxious child. "Everything you need is here, except for the wetland raisins." Upon hearing this, the boy quickly grabbed the list back to verify. "My grandfather insisted I buy everything listed here," the boy said, frustration evident in his voice. "Now he's going to scold me." Observing the boy's dismay, I shrugged indifferently. "There's nothing I can do about that." As the boy departed, Tang Mi signaled a clerk, instructing, "Store the wet raisins." The clerk nodded and proceeded with the task, while Tang Mi pondered the boy's peculiar shopping list. "These items seem rare or unavailable in other stores," he thought, furrowing his brow. Curious, Tang Mi decided to investigate the boy's purchase history. Transactions made with the little wizard card were recorded for security and convenience. Upon reviewing the records, Tang Mi noticed a pattern. The items the boy had been purchasing were all related to healing, and they shared a common trait. They were rare materials that only Silver Hands possessed. Someone is manipulating him from behind the scenes, but to what end? Tang Mi mused as he examined the parchment. It was clear that someone was deliberately choosing rare materials, not only for their cost, but also to draw attention. They want to be noticed by me, Tang Mi realized. With this knowledge, Tang Mi stepped outside the shop, intending to follow the boy. However, sensing that they were being watched, he reluctantly returned to the shop, pretending to dismiss his suspicions. "Someone is observing," Tang Mi noted silently. Though he wanted to investigate further, he decided to instruct his trusted associates to keep an eye on the boy during his future visits. Upon returning home, the boy presented his purchases to his grandfather, who laughed heartily. However, the old man's mood soured upon learning that the wetland raisins were bought at a standard price. The boy, feeling wronged, explained, "They were out of stock." "What a useless shop, not even fully stocked," the old man grumbled. Later that afternoon, a young man in a hood returned to the old man to collect his items. The old man, feigning difficulty, complained, "The items you requested are exceedingly rare. You can't imagine the effort I expended." Growing impatient, the young man retorted, "What are you trying to pull?" "Just a little extra for the effort," the old man replied, his greed apparent. The young man scoffed, "Do you take me for a fool? I went through great lengths to secure the wetland raisings. A small compensation for my efforts isn't unreasonable," the old man argued, oblivious to the young man's growing frustration. Realizing the conversation was going nowhere, the young man collected his belongings and left, leaving the old man to his delusions. Tossing a bag of coins, the young man watched as the old man, with a thief's quickness, eagerly counted the money, his face breaking into a smile. Once back in the boat, the young man deftly took out his wand, gave it a wave, and the rope untied itself, allowing him to drift down the current. Dusk was settling in. As he passed under an arch bridge, he ducked his head to avoid being seen by two wizards walking above. Continuing on, he eventually reached a secluded hideout, shrouded in vegetation. The young man unloaded his supplies and entered, just as the small boat began to sink, disappearing beneath the water's surface. The interior of the hideout was modest, yet showed signs of recent habitation. He took out some white meat from his supplies and tossed some wetland raisins into a crucible beside it. Removing his hood and setting down his wand, the young man ran a hand through his hair and muttered to himself, "You really can sleep through anything." After stirring the concoction in the crucible for a moment, he opened a container of bai xian and approached the only bed in the room. A figure lay there, and the young man picked up a silver knife, carefully cutting away the bandages. He then sprinkled bai san on the freshly bleeding wound, watching as the blood continued to flow. Setting the knife aside, he observed, "We're lucky." Silverhand took notice. Taking out a needle and thread, he began to stitch the wound, from which necrotic tissue had been removed. "I think we're nearly finished here," he said, his voice carrying a hint of relief. As his vision began to blur slightly, he remembered there was still something he needed to do. Placing his hand on his neck, he massaged it for a moment before a piece of skin began to lift. Gripping it, he slowly and carefully peeled it away, revealing a new face beneath. "Thank goodness for my excellent marks in Muggle studies and learning new tricks," he mused, setting the piece of skin aside to reveal another face beneath. It was then he instinctively reached for his pocket and cursed under his breath. "I forgot I'm out of cigarettes." After wiping off the remaining adhesive, the familiar face of Tang Mi was revealed, but it was not Tang Mi who lay beneath the disguise. It was the missing Auror, Rippy Kerber, his identity concealed beneath layers of magic and disguise. Chapter 644. Fugitive and Auror, Lippy set the freshly brewed potion aside to cool. After meticulously stitching up the wound, he sat down, grabbed a piece of bread, and took a hearty bite. Glancing at the figure resting on the bed, he remarked, "Gauss, the renowned trainer. Had I not reviewed your profile, I might never have rescued you." Indeed, Lippy was very much alive, or, to put it more accurately, he had narrowly escaped death. Employing a cunning strategy, he evaded capture. An unfortunate employee, whose identity Lippy had appropriated, ended up as the unwitting decoy. Lippy had stumbled upon the unconscious employee, gruesomely removed his face, since the compound potion required living hair, and donned the employee's clothes to create a convincing scapegoat. This disguise allowed Lippy to infiltrate the Ministry of Magic once more, a move the Ministry surely hadn't anticipated anyone daring to attempt. Lippy opened a book brimming with the names and positions of the Polish Ministry of Magic's employees. Each name was accompanied by a symbol. "I hadn't realized the extent of the infiltration," Lippy mused, his eyes narrowing. Opting not to return to the UK, he chose instead to remain and delve deeper into his investigation, driven by a desire for advancement. The identity he had assumed belonged to an employee from an unsupervised or black area, affording him greater freedom to operate clandestinely. "Star Rosier," Lippy pondered, tracing the name with his pen. The evidence suggests he wasn't replaced, but was in fact a willing collaborator even before Grindelwald's arrival. This revelation was startling. Lippy wondered when Grindelwald had first set his sights on Inge Griffith. Flipping to the last page, he found only two names, Bart Schmidt, marked as deceased, and Inge Griffith, listed as missing. Uncovering the real Inge's fate was crucial. Whether Grindelwald had murdered him or merely hidden him away, the truth could potentially dismantle Grindelwald's schemes. "Foolish Grindelwald, your downfall is imminent," Lippy muttered, finishing his bread just as a groan emanated from the bed. Gauss was stirring at last. Gauss was disoriented, half convinced of his own demise. After all, surviving a cursed blade to the heart was a rarity. His last memory was of being submerged in water, drifting aimlessly. "I remember someone pulling me out," he mumbled, wincing at the pain in his chest. "Why does death hurt so much?" "You're not dead. Drink this," a voice instructed. Gauss, mistaking his rescuer for someone else, queried, "Musashi?" Instead of an answer, he was met with the bitter taste of the potion. The concoction was revolting, but Gauss managed to down it, collapsing back onto the bed in a mix of relief and despair. As he lay there, a sinister smile crept across Lippy's face. "No need for reintroductions, I presume?" Lippy's recognition of Gauss wasn't solely due to the latter's status on the wanted list. Their paths had crossed before. Back then, Lippy, a fledgling auror, had found himself at odds with the well-known, albeit mercenary, therapist. Gauss, scrutinizing Lippy, ventured, "Perhaps an introduction is in order?" It was clear Gauss hadn't taken their previous encounter to heart. Lippy's smile stiffened momentarily before he managed a strained, courteous response. "Rippy Kerber, auror training instructor, at your service, Mr. Fugitive Gauss." As a fugitive wanted by several countries, Gauss's situation was dire. Yet in this unexpected meeting, an unspoken alliance was forming, one that could alter the course of their intertwined fates. Gauss suddenly realized the identity of his visitor. "It turns out to be someone from the Ministry of Magic," he murmured, touching his chest where the sharp knife had once been embedded in his heart. Now, in its place, was an unsightly, centipede-like stitched wound. A wave of nausea hit him as a dreadful thought crossed his mind, causing him to writhe in agony on the bed, clutching his head. My money!" Gauss screamed, his voice filled with despair. The realization that his money was gone struck him as a fate worse than death. In a panic, he grabbed Lippy's hand, his eyes wide with fear. Lippy, taken aback, instinctively reached for the weapon that had nearly ended Gauss's life. "Tell me there's still time to get it back," Gauss pleaded, his voice laced with hope. He clung to the belief that as long as his boss remained unaware, he could rectify the situation. Lippy looked at him with a mixture of pity and concern. "I'm afraid it's too late. It's been quite a while," he said gently. Upon hearing this, Gauss's eyes rolled back, and he fainted, collapsing onto the bed. When Gauss regained consciousness, the room was silent except for the bubbling of a potion being prepared. He opened his eyes, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Tell me this is just a nightmare," he mumbled, but before he could finish, Lippy administered a new potion. After a moment of silence, the auror and the fugitive sat facing each other, neither knowing quite what to say. Gauss's disheartened demeanor made Lippy hesitant to speak, fearing it might cause Gauss to faint once more. "So we're still in Poland?" Gauss finally broke the silence, his tone devoid of any anger. Instead, he seemed resigned, almost indifferent. Lippy, energized by the topic, shared his plan. "I am Minister Crouch, and you are Silver Hand. We have no conflict," he began, handing Gauss a notebook. "I've investigated the Polish Ministry of Magic. If we can uncover the real Inge Griffith, all our problems will be solved." Gauss skimmed the notebook and pushed it back with a detached air. "I've retired," he stated flatly. "Retired? When did that happen?" Lippy asked, confused and slightly frustrated. "The moment I fell into the water," Gauss replied, referring to his financial ruin. Lippy, misunderstanding, thought Gauss was speaking metaphorically about his bankruptcy. Gauss's expression cracked at the mention, a twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying his pain. "What do you hope to gain by retiring now?" Lippy pressed, pointing out the harsh reality. "You've worked hard your entire life, only to end up with nothing." "I have some left." Gauss began to protest, but a quick check of his pockets revealed they were empty. Shocked, he realized he had always made a point of carrying money with him. Lippy shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. I'm sorry, all your money has been spent. In a mix of anger and desperation, Gauss wanted to lash out at Lippy, who casually placed the bloody blade on the table as a reminder of their precarious situation. Gauss conceded, recognizing that while money could be earned again, life, once lost, could not be reclaimed. May I help you? Gauss asked, his demeanor shifting to one of cooperation. We'll search both the Ministry of Magic and the residence, Lippy suggested. Working together, I believe we can find what we're looking for. Do you think this is some Muggle movie? Are you imagining yourself as the Return of the King? Gauss retorted, his frustration evident. Despite his reservations about returning to a place where he had nearly died, Lippy's silent threat with the blade convinced him to agree. It's settled then. I'll help, but not for free, Gauss bargained. Lippy, intrigued, asked, What do you want in return? Gauss, with a hint of cunning, replied, I need to be compensated. No problem, Lippy agreed, setting the stage for their unlikely partnership. Gauss, still maintaining his director-level composure, smiled confidently. Just name your price. 5,000 galleons, he stated. Okay, just 5 or 5,000? Lippy was taken aback, his grip tightening on the blood-stained blade. Are you joking? Who can afford that? That was the fee for my last assignment, Gauss replied calmly, his expression unchanging. He inflated the figure by 2,000, adding, If you doubt me, feel free to verify with my employer. John Wick, 5,000 galleons might be reasonable in that context. However, Lippy's surname was Kerber, not Wick. A twitch formed at the corner of his mouth as he clenched his teeth. Don't you feel obliged to repay the favor of saving your life? Business is business. If you save me once, I'll save you in return, Gauss countered, unyielding. You might kill me, but you can't take my money. This man is relentless in his pursuit of wealth. Taking a deep breath, Lippy conceded. Fine, I agree to your terms, but payment will be made after the job is completed. No advance payment? Gauss asked, clearly displeased. That's against the rules. If you utter one more word, I'll throw you into the river outside, Lippy threatened, the bloody blade in his hand underscoring his authority as the boss. Chapter 645. Fred's Wedding, a Lively Affair. John had always assumed that Percy would be the first among the Weasley siblings to tie the knot. However, to his surprise, the first wedding invitation he received was from Fred. Fred is getting married, he mused, holding the invitation in his hands, a look of disbelief crossing his face. I never would have guessed Fred would be the first to settle down. Among the Weasley brothers, Fred was notoriously the most mischievous, even more so than George, who was slightly more mature. The idea of such a free spirit getting married was astonishing to John. The bride-to-be was none other than Angelina Johnson, the former Gryffindor Quidditch captain and a formidable witch in her own right. The pairing was unexpected, but not unwelcome. John set the invitation aside and turned his attention to the exhausted owl in the corner, bullied into submission by Basil. Due to the overwhelming number of wedding notifications, Fred had borrowed Ron's owl, Pigwidgeon, for the task. The poor creature would have been plucked bare if John hadn't intervened. After sending his RSVP, John fetched a couple of dried fish from the attic drawer to reward the beleaguered messenger. Pigwidgeon hesitated before offering one of the fish to Basil, who accepted it with a nod of approval. The owl then made a hasty retreat. Watching this exchange, John couldn't help but remark on Basil's peculiar behavior. You weren't like this before, were you? He asked the owl, who fluttered her wings in annoyance. Downstairs, John found Ariana in the midst of a similar predicament with Kiki, her increasingly plump fire dragon. Kiki ate my cookie, Ariana complained, visibly upset. John's perception of Kiki shifted. It was hard to imagine a fire dragon resorting to stealing cookies. Kiki's defense was that it had been subjected to a diet of salads for a month. Sympathizing with Kiki, John smoothed Ariana's hair and proposed a solution. It must be really hungry. Let's give it the biscuits, and I'll take you somewhere special for a treat. Ariana immediately released Kiki, who tearfully hid the biscuit behind the sofa, savoring it as if it were a precious treasure. Tom, the family dog, observed the scene with confusion, unable to grasp the significance of the biscuit to the owl. John, seeing Ariana's happiness, decided that attending Fred's wedding wouldn't be an issue, even if he brought someone along. He informed Tom of their plans to return later that day, though he regretfully couldn't bring the dog along. Contemplating their mode of transportation, John suggested to Ariana, "How about we try the night bus?" Ariana, unfamiliar with the concept, tilted her head in curiosity. As they stepped outside, John felt the gaze of several onlookers. "They're all spying on Dad," he noted, recognizing the watchers. Unperturbed, he led Ariana to Crescent Street, aware of a tale. With a flick of his wand, he conjured a gust of wind, blinding their follower and making a discreet escape using a confusion charm. Moments later, the towering 3-story night bus screeched to a halt in front of them, ready to whisk them away to Fred's wedding. The conductor, his face adorned with pimples, stepped forward with widened eyes, ready to make an introduction. "Jesus! John Wick!" exclaimed Stan Thornpark, unable to contain his excitement. "I am the second king of the wizarding world." He approached John with great enthusiasm, showering him with various forms of attention along the way. Even Ariana, who was usually not easily overlooked due to her delicate demeanor, found herself ignored in his presence. It seemed only a matter of time before Stan would boast about his connection to the Second King during his next tavern visit. Upon their arrival at the Leaky Cauldron, Stan, with a respectful tone and a tip of his hat, said, "It's an honor to serve you, Mr. Wick." John acknowledged him with a slight nod and led an intrigued Astoria into the establishment. As they entered, they noticed Hannah being instructed on the nuances of the business set by the proprietor. "Hannah," John greeted. "John?" Hannah responded, her surprise evident despite it being less than a week since their last encounter at Hogwarts. Upon noticing Ariana, Hannah inquired, "And who might this be?" "This is my sister, Ariana Wick," John introduced. Turning to Ariana, he said, "Ariana, meet Hannah Abbott." Hannah, taken aback, remarked, "I had no idea you had a younger sister." She couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Not only was Ariana beautiful, but she was also the sister of the Second King. What stroke of luck she must have, Hannah thought to herself. Ariana, slightly hiding behind John, peeked out and shyly said, "Hello." "Hello, Ariana. Are you a witch as well?" Hannah directed the question towards John. With a smile, John nodded. "Indeed, she is, and I'm hoping you can keep this place a bit cleaner," he added, a gentle nudge towards the state of the establishment. Hannah, slightly embarrassed by the comment, agreed, "I suppose so." The group didn't linger long before making their way through the Leaky Cauldron to Diagon Alley. As they walked, Ariana's initial nervousness about the unfamiliar surroundings began to fade. In Diagon Alley, everyone who recognized John greeted him with respect, addressing him as Mr. Wick. Ariana also enjoyed her time, picking up a golden snitch souvenir from a Quidditch boutique and trying a new flavor of ice cream from the ice cream shop. They even took a case of wine from the Silverhand wine cellar before heading to the Burrow. The Burrow was bustling with activity. The Weasleys' status as the second ancient clan was evident from the gathering. Relatives from both sides of the family, as well as friends like Harry, were present. Luna Lovegood, in her unique attire, was among the guests, accompanied by her father. Fred Weasley, donning a tuxedo that amusingly resembled a hotel receptionist's uniform, yet drew mixed reactions of laughter and disbelief. Percy, alongside his girlfriend Penelope, wore a content smile, happy for his younger brother's wedding. With the number of guests, tents were pitched outside the Burrow to accommodate everyone. Upon their arrival, George and Mr. Weasley welcomed them. "Please, come inside, sir," George said, wearing the same tuxedo as Fred. Spotting John, George approached with a comedic flair. "Oh, the great John Wick, shall I roll out the red carpet for you?" John, recognizing the twins' penchant for mischief, replied with a mix of amusement and resignation, "Don't tell me you've played the Who Am I game again today." George offered an awkward smile, and John, shaking his head, hoped the victims of their pranks wouldn't be too upset. The twins were notorious for swapping identities to fool others. Inside, John noticed Dumbledore engaged in conversation with an elderly woman. Ron Weasley, ever the dutiful nephew, was roped into serving as a temporary waiter, much to the delight of his Aunt Muriel. Harry, looking sharp in his attire, bore a striking resemblance to his godfather, Sirius. When Luna noticed John, she greeted him warmly. "This is my sister, Ariana Wick," John introduced. Ariana, intrigued by Luna's unique dress and the glowing sequins, looked on with curiosity. Luna, taking a liking to Ariana, seemed eager to befriend her, hinting at the beginning of a new friendship. Luna always possessed a keen insight into Ariana's emotions and seemed to understand her intentions effortlessly. Ariana? Albus, did I just hear Ariana's name? Luna inquired, her curiosity piqued. Miss Bagshot, John interjected, drawing attention to the elderly woman who had been conversing with Dumbledore. He turned to face her, observing the marks of time etched into her features. She was an elderly lady, her hair as white as snow, wrapped in a cozy woolen shawl for warmth. John found himself staring at Miss Bagshot, his mind momentarily adrift. The image of the old woman before him began to merge with memories of another woman from his past, one who had a fondness for books. Bathilda Bagshot. The realization hit him with a mix of surprise and nostalgia. Bathilda Bagshot, a name synonymous with wisdom and history within the wizarding world, stood before them. Her presence, though frail, carried the weight of countless stories and secrets, many of which had shaped the very fabric of their magical community. As the group absorbed the significance of Miss Bagshot's presence, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. Each of them understood that the conversation to follow would likely unveil truths long buried, and perhaps shed light on mysteries that had puzzled them for ages. Chapter 646, Old Lady Reunion. I must be hearing things, Albus, Bathilda Bagshot murmured, half convinced she was experiencing a hallucination. Dumbledore offered her a gentle smile in response. It's been ages since I've been to such a vibrant gathering, Bathilda remarked, her eyes scanning the lively scene before her. You should venture out more often, Dumbledore suggested warmly. The world is full of new wonders now. Is that so? Bathilda replied, her interest only mildly piqued. After all, she considered herself quite the homebody these days. Had it not been for the Weasleys' wedding invitation, she likely wouldn't have ventured out at all. Suddenly, Bathilda began to rub her eyes, a look of discomfort crossing her face. What's the matter? Dumbledore inquired, just as he was about to offer her some dessert. I fear my eyesight is failing me in my old age, Albus, she confessed, squinting in a particular direction. I could swear I see a familiar face. Dumbledore followed her gaze, landing on John. Choosing not to disturb the moment, he quietly excused himself, walking towards Moody instead. He understood that John preferred not to be disturbed at this time. Albus, doesn't that young man look familiar to you? Bathilda continued, still caught in the grip of recognition. She turned back to find Dumbledore had already left her side. Albus? John approached and took a seat opposite Bathilda. Hello, young man, but I believe the person you're waiting for will return soon, she said, her memory still failing her. John faced the elderly woman who had once offered him much-needed help during a difficult period in his life. With a smile, he introduced himself. Hello, my name is John Wick. Wick? Bathilda's face lit up at the mention of the name, though she couldn't place why. I once knew a Wick. A good boy. His name was... Her voice trailed off, her memory clouding over once again. What was his name? She pondered aloud. Joel, John supplied gently, taking her aged, wrinkled hand in his. His name was Joel Wick. Joel. Bathilda's foggy memory began to clear, revealing the image of a boy with white hair. The boy who had transformed her leaky roof into a skylight, the boy who had left. Slowly, the memories began to resurface. Feeling the warmth of John's hand on hers, Bathilda's recollection became clearer. The image of the white-haired boy merged with the black-haired man sitting before her. Joel, she whispered. Here I am, John replied with a smile. Ma'am. You promised we would meet again, Bathilda observed, noting the unchanged youth in John's appearance compared to her aged hands. She smiled warmly, a rare expression for her. I'm an old woman now, boy. And you're still so young. As she reached out to touch John's face, she remarked, Your eyes are healed, but you seem troubled. John allowed her gesture, a hint of emotion flickering in his eyes. I'm growing up too, ma'am. And you've grown old. It was as if they had been transported back a century, to the days of the scholarly Bathilda and the white-haired, visually impaired boy. It's been so long since we last saw each other, Bathilda said, her voice heavy with emotion. The reunion, which felt like it had bridged a century's gap in mere moments, was deeply moving. Tears welled up in the old woman's eyes as John softly said, I'm very happy to see you again." "And I, just as happy," Bathilda replied, her vision blurring as she imagined the white-haired boy now accompanied by two others, though they too were aged. Their heartfelt reunion was momentarily paused as Fred's wedding ceremony commenced. The atmosphere was perfectly in tune with Fred's character. Mrs. Weasley had initially planned for a formal band performance and attire, but Fred had other ideas. He insisted on a more relaxed dress code, leading to a delightful mix of guests in wizard robes, beach shorts, and even pajamas. Harry, noticing Mrs. Weasley's absence, asked, "Where's Mrs. Weasley?" Ron explained with a hint of amusement. Fred tricked her into the kitchen. He had initially planned to use a body-binding spell to keep her there until after the wedding. Why? Harry couldn't grasp the reason behind this. Ron looked at him, astonished. "You have no idea how terrifying she can be, and she's insisting on bringing the symphony here." The mere thought made Ron shiver as he added, "That would be tantamount to our doom." Harry pondered over it and realized the frightening implications. The wedding ceremony commenced in earnest. Mr. Weasley adjusted his bow tie, pulling it a tad tighter, while Mrs. Weasley donned a new, elegant purple robe, complemented by a stunning jeweled hat gifted by the twins. Their faces beamed with joy, a stark contrast to Fred and George, who narrowly avoided Mrs. Weasley's wrath, each sporting large white roses in their buttonholes. Bill looked on, a touch of melancholy in his eyes, which Charlie noticed and offered a comforting pat on the shoulder, advising him to move past his feelings for Fleur. Yet, forgetting someone like Fleur was easier said than done. As the golden balloon ascended, Angelina, holding on to her father Mr. Johnson's hand, made her way down the lavender carpet. The guests settled into their seats, just as Fred took Angelina's hand from Mr. Johnson, their smiles radiating mutual affection. Ron couldn't help but comment, "He's actually serious this time." The officiating wizard addressed Fred, "Fred Weasley, do you take Angelina Johnson?" Following their heartfelt vows, he proclaimed, "I declare you to be lifelong partners." Mrs. Weasley, overcome with emotion, wept softly behind her lace veil. Hagrid, ever the gentle giant, also found himself tearing up, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief the size of a tablecloth. Ariana sat next to John, her gaze fixed on the ceremony. John, moved by the moment, gently touched Ariana's head, saying, "One day, you'll have a wedding of your own." Ariana blinked in response, but Luna, ever the literalist, corrected, "That's not a rose, it's one of Weasley's new products, the Bang Bang fireworks." Her father, Mr. Lovegood, was also diligently at work. Just as the wizard was about to introduce the band, John noticed the corners of Fred's mouth curl upwards, a clear sign he had no intention of a conventional wedding celebration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Fred interrupted, pulling off the white rose and raising it high, exclaiming, "Let's party." The rose in his hand blossomed, transforming into a flurry of white doves that took flight. They popped the golden balloons, which turned into large candy bubbles that gently descended. The wedding tent soared into the air as Weasley's wizard Wheez's fireworks erupted, painting the sky with vibrant colors. The band, initially set for a more subdued performance, tore off their clothes to reveal lively, upbeat attire, instantly changing the music to a more festive tune. Glasses rained from the sky, assembling into a champagne tower as tall as Hagrid himself. John's lips curled into a smile. Indeed, silence was never their style. Only a carnival could suffice. Mrs. Weasley, initially taken aback, was soon swept into the dance. Fred and Angelina, lost in their joyous dance, erupted into laughter. The tails of Fred's tuxedo detached, transforming into two lively magpies that flew around the wedding, intertwining with every burst of laughter and joy. Chapter 647, Watson's Comparison and the Second King's Banquet. The Weasley wedding was not just a celebration of love, but also a testament to the family's extensive connections. Unlike the Malfoy family, which kept its distance, more than half of the 28 ancient wizarding families attended the event. This turnout was a clear indicator of the Weasleys' significant standing among pure-blood families, a status not solely based on power or wealth, but on a reputation that has been upheld for generations. The Weasleys, with their long lineage of pure blood and a history of considerable wealth, have always been prominent. Their family has even held the esteemed position of head of Hogwarts in the past, symbolizing the continuation of a loyal and influential force. In the intricate web of family alliances, the number of heirs a family has is of paramount importance. The Weasleys, with their 6 sons and 1 daughter, had an undeniable advantage in this regard. There were times when the family struggled financially, leading John to speculate whether Mr. Weasley's passion for Muggle artifacts had drained their resources. Mr. Weasley's integrity was unquestionable. He was a man who steered clear of vices. Yet the family's financial woes were a stark contrast to their noble name, causing Percy to openly challenge his father. John couldn't help but worry about the future of the Weasley lineage, despite his fondness for Percy and the twins. After the wedding, John, accompanied by Ariana and Luna, decided to leave. As they said their goodbyes, Bathilda Bagshot expressed her surprise and delight at seeing Ariana. She remarked that Ariana seemed much happier and better off with John than she would have been elsewhere. This affirmation of John's decision to take Ariana under his wing was comforting. Choosing not to use the night bus, John opted for a more personal mode of departure. "I think our parents are waiting," he said with a smile, aware that night was falling and wanting to avoid another encounter with the agents. Ariana, holding John's hand tightly, prepared herself for apparition. John observed her closely, noting her discomfort, but also her growing adaptation to magic. He had chosen apparition over teleportation specifically to gauge Ariana's progress in managing her magical abilities. John believed that embracing and controlling her power was essential for Ariana's well-being, much like Credence had to learn. Once they arrived outside John's home on Privet Drive, they took a moment to allow Ariana to recover from the apparition. The Dumbledore bloodline was renowned for its magical prowess, and Ariana was no exception. John was determined to help her harness her abilities, knowing that suppression was not a viable long-term strategy. As they approached the door, John discreetly used magic to obscure the agent's vision, allowing them to enter unnoticed. Shortly after, Watson arrived, carrying flowers and sweets. To the agent's astonishment, Watson seemed to appear out of nowhere due to John's spell. Unperturbed, Watson entered the house, leaving the agents bewildered. "I am back," Watson announced cheerfully, presenting Mrs. Wick with a large bouquet of flowers. "I couldn't find any flowers that can complement your beauty," he said affectionately, demonstrating his thoughtfulness and the deep bond he shared with the family. "Beauty, please allow me to express my affection with roses," Watson said, his voice laced with charm as he presented Mrs. Wick with a rose, causing her to blush, a rare sight. "And of course, for the lovely Ariana," he added, taking out a candy, specifically a gummy bear. Ariana, momentarily forgetting the wedding cake she had just enjoyed from the Weasleys, ran over with glee. Watson couldn't help but look at his son, John, with a triumphant grin as he saw the women in his family being sweetly coaxed by him. John, however, only offered his father a blank stare, finding his antics rather childish. "Brother Sweet," Ariana said, unwrapping the candy and offering the first brown bear to John. Despite his initial reluctance, John found it hard to refuse, especially when Ariana, with a mischievous smile, decided to feed him directly. Accepting his fate, John opened his mouth, allowing Ariana to feed him. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she happily opened the remaining candies, giving John the first taste. Watson, feigning hurt, approached them and hinted to Ariana, "Daddy wants to eat sweets too." Ariana, taking his request seriously, handed him the candy box. Watson, looking between John and the box, jokingly asked, "Aren't you forgetting something? Like perhaps feeding me directly?" Ariana, tilting her head in confusion, simply handed Watson a new box of candies. Watson, dramatically clutching his heart, exclaimed, "Impossible! I can't believe my own wife would treat me this way," as he glanced at Mrs. Wick, who was busy arranging the roses in a vase, adding a touch of beauty to what she considered John's otherwise drab room. "Why have I been so thoroughly defeated?" Watson lamented, unable to grasp the full extent of his playful defeat. John, for his part, was bewildered by his father's competitive antics, not understanding the rivalry that seemed to have sprung up between them. Watson, feeling somewhat challenged, reflected on his efforts to provide a prosperous life for John, only to find his son commanding respect and loyalty at school, akin to a young lord of Downton Abbey. Surrounded by formidable allies. "I made you a rich second generation, not for you to start your own empire." Watson thought, puzzled by the turn of events. After spending a few days at home, John decided it was time to focus on integrating his two main forces, the Silverhand Alliance and the Ancient Alliance. The Silverhand Alliance, well known to those who attended the banquet at the Silverhand Manor, was already under his influence. However, the Ancient Alliance, recently reorganized by Lucius, had yet to fully recognize John's authority. John believed that for the Ancient Alliance to be as effective as the Silverhand Alliance, he needed to assert his control, or else consider disbanding it. Dressed in a luxurious robe and admiring the emerald on his left hand in the full-length mirror, John smiled at his reflection. "Interesting, isn't it?" he mused, tracing a golden line down the center of the mirror, which split open to reveal a passage. As he stepped forward, the sound of his footsteps echoed, signaling his arrival. The grand hall, adorned with exquisite decorations and bathed in the soft white light of crystal lamps, was filled with members of the 28 ancient clans and the Silverhand Alliance. These groups, responsible for contributing more than half of the Ministry of Magic's taxes, represented the most significant interests in the UK. Among the attendees, Mr. Weasley adjusted his collar uncomfortably, not fond of such formal gatherings. He glanced at Percy, who stood beside him. Nearby, Mr. Longbottom and his wife engaged in conversation with old acquaintances. Mr. Weasley's attention was then caught by a woman in a green shirt. "Is that Rita Skeeter?" he wondered, recognizing the editor-in-chief of the Piston. The revelation that the Daily Prophet was a member of the Silverhand Alliance sent shockwaves through the gathering. Among the attendees were not just local influencers, but also emissaries from abroad, including the son of the French Minister of Magic, Charles Roland. The diversity of the crowd underscored the Alliance's extensive reach, suggesting that no sector remained untouched by their influence. Percy, standing next to his father, Mr. Weasley, remarked, "Survival of the fittest, Dad. We have to make a choice." Despite his reluctance, Mr. Weasley couldn't deny the weight of Percy's words. The notion demanded serious consideration. The animated discussions that filled the room ceased abruptly as a golden passage materialized out of nowhere. All eyes turned to witness the arrival of a figure of paramount importance in the magical world, the Second King, making his entrance from the second floor, his presence commanding attention. "Your Excellency Silverhand," some greeted, while others opted for a more familiar, "Mr. Wick." The mixture of titles added to the cacophony of voices, creating a buzz of anticipation. John, the man of the hour, frowned at the disorder. With a snap of his fingers, the lights dimmed, drawing everyone's focus to him. "The obsolete past should be discarded. Our path lies ahead, anew," he declared, his voice resonating with authority. The magical passage vanished behind him, a feat that left the audience in awe, especially given the Silverhand Manor's known enchantments against apparition. This display of power was not merely for show. It served as a clear message. John was not one to be underestimated. The crowd's idle chatter was replaced by a focused attention, hanging on every word that John spoke. His ability to command the room with such ease was a testament to his influence and the respect he commanded among his peers. Chapter 648, Repression and Strength. John's hand, adorned with an emerald green ring, rested on the bronze railing as he descended the stairs from the second floor. 5 years ago, this place was engulfed in utter chaos, he began, his voice steady and commanding attention. Families, which should have been allies, turned into mortal enemies over mere benefits. In such a disorderly society, corruption thrived, eating away at the margins of profit. He continued, gaps in information led to injustice, unfair transactions bred conflicts, and conflicts escalated into violence. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, John stepped onto the first floor, now on the same level as everyone else. "Violence only serves to decay the very essence of magic," he stated, his gaze sweeping across the room. Some of the attendees averted their eyes, but John remained unfazed and proceeded to walk into the arena. His presence alone made people step aside to give him space. Interests can be both shackles and hinges. We are drawn together by interests, united by them, and bound by them, John explained. I, too, wish to see an end to the senseless killing among wizards. The rules I've established are designed to serve the wizards and preserve our power. Fairness is a concept riddled with contradictions, no matter where you find it. I cannot promise absolute fairness to all wizards, but I can assure you, John paused, now standing at the center of the crowd, that what I oversee will be fair. His eyes then fixed on 3 individuals in front of him. The crowd around them dispersed, leaving them conspicuously isolated. Yaxley, Avery, and Caro looked visibly panicked as John called out their names one by one. Approaching them, he asked indifferently, "I forgave you for being my enemies. Why did you not appreciate that gesture?" Yaxley, attempting to maintain his composure, responded, "Mr. Wick, we have never stood against you." John smiled faintly, turning his back to them as he walked away. "Voldemort ruled you with fear. I offered you generosity and a chance to live. Yet, you've squandered that generosity," he said lightly. "Did you think I was unaware of your schemes in the materials industry? Let me guess your current objective. Are you trying to tarnish the Longbottom family's reputation or cause this alliance to collapse? It's astonishing that Voldemort's influence still commands your loyalty, even after his death." With a snap of his fingers, John conjured a dueling stand on the ground between them. Standing on it, he said indifferently, "Step up or leave now." Realizing their deeds had been exposed, Yaxley, Caro, and Avery exchanged glances before stepping onto the dueling ring together, eliciting boos from the onlookers who accused them of shamelessness. John raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "My friends, there is no shame in acknowledging your capabilities," he chuckled. "It's refreshing to see some self-awareness regarding one's own limitations." The crowd laughed, their mocking and contemptuous glares slicing through the dignity of the 3 men. Yaxley's face flushed with anger and resentment towards John. As the 3 assumed a combative stance, John calmly reminded them, "It seems you've forgotten the proper etiquette before a duel." He drew his wand, raising it slowly. "Now, bow." A force pressed down on the 3 men, bending their bodies despite their resistance. John's power forced them to bow at a 90-degree angle, showcasing his formidable strength, a level of power not even Aurors could easily contest. John nodded slightly, releasing them from the force. Without hesitation, they launched their spells simultaneously at John. Petrificus Totalis, Expelliarmus, Stupefy, 3 spells flew towards him. John raised his wand, effortlessly blocking the spells. The 3 wizards then coordinated a relentless barrage of magic, but to no avail. Every spell they cast was stopped in its tracks, unable to even come close to John. Through this display, John was not only flexing his magical prowess, but also sending a clear message to everyone present. His strength was unparalleled. In the aftermath of a student's departure from school, the importance of demonstrating strength to reassure the newly formed alliance was paramount. When John effortlessly blocked all incoming attacks, standing unmovable like a mountain, admiration filled the air, though it was quickly replaced by a mix of emotions from the leaders of the ancient alliance. "Okay, I think it's time for you to rest," John said, effortlessly dodging a green curse cast by Carlo. With a swift raise of his hand, a white light shot forth, piercing Carlo's body. Carlo's expression twisted in disbelief as he reached out, hoping for salvation from his teammates, only to watch his hand disintegrate into dust. Within seconds, he was reduced to nothing, instilling a palpable sense of terror among the onlookers. "Is that the shattering curse?" Mr. Weasley whispered, a mix of horror and awe in his voice. In Percy's eyes, however, there was only pride. As the situation escalated, 2 others attempted to flee, but they too were stopped in their tracks by John's gaze, which had shifted to vertical pupils. They collapsed, their fates uncertain, leaving the Silver Hand Manor engulfed in a deathly silence. John stepped down from the dueling ring, his voice calm yet firm. "I am not a murderous person. What they provoked was the bottom line of being a wizard," he explained, snapping his fingers to summon a parchment that flew from the manor. It detailed the 3 families' involvement in deplorable activities, including the torture of muggles for entertainment and experimentation. "I will report this to the Ministry of Magic," John declared, addressing the shocked expressions around him. "What we need, more than anyone, is to preserve the status quo." Lucius Malfoy was the first to break the silence, applauding John's actions. "Your Excellency Wick, please allow me to commend your nobility." His applause served as a cue, prompting others to join in. The leaders of the ancient tribe also showed their approval, solidifying John's new title. Sir John Wick. Together, the Ancient Alliance and the Silver Hand Alliance formed a new era, dubbed the Second Dynasty. John pledged to share the wealth confiscated from the three disgraced families among those present, a gesture that did not sit well with everyone. Mr. Weasley, known for his love of muggles, found the actions of the three families abhorrent, deserving of severe punishment. As the evening progressed, Percy was invited by Pierce to share a drink, an offer he couldn't refuse in such a setting. Mr. Weasley, too, was drawn away by the head of the Prewett family, leaving John to share a moment with Lucius. "Thank you for your support, Lucius," John expressed, acknowledging Lucius's earlier discomfort regarding Mr. Weasley's presence. "He will adjust. We are not villains. In many ways, we seek justice." John's definition of justice was clear. Control and the ability to improve lives constituted righteousness. Under his leadership, the Second Dynasty controlled a significant portion of the magical society's wealth and resources, bringing about true fairness and reducing conflict without the need for pure-blood supremacy. This new era of justice, as envisioned by John, stood in stark contrast to the old ways upheld by figures like Dumbledore, who relied on personal power and past glories. John's approach promised a future where the magical community could thrive, united under the banner of the Second Dynasty. Unlike his predecessors, John didn't immerse himself in the intricacies of the wizarding world. However, his approach marked a significant departure, one that leaned towards the light. The establishment of the Little Wizard Fund alone had been enough to sway families worldwide to his side, heralding a new era of justice. The fact that Mr. Weasley found this shift uncomfortable was of little consequence to John. Under his guidance, the Weasley family maintained its status as the second most influential ancient clan with ease. Even after his retirement, with Percy stepping into the limelight, the Weasleys remained steadfast allies of the so-called Second Dynasty. John couldn't help but smile at the thought. "We'll only grow stronger, Lucius," he declared, raising his glass in a toast. "Tomorrow promises us an even brighter future." The room erupted in cheers, with every eye fixed on the young man who stood before them. John's youth was not just his greatest asset, it was a promise of longevity and prosperity for the Second Dynasty, which was now projected to thrive for at least a century. Those who aligned themselves with John's vision were assured a share in this century of glory. Lucius Malfoy, too, shared in the optimism. The 3 stars adorning his cane symbolized his elevated status, and as he raised his wineglass, he proclaimed loudly, "To His Excellency Wick." This gesture not only reflected Lucius's own prestige, but also signified the dawn of a golden era for the Malfoy family, one that was expected to grow stronger and endure longer as his children came of age. Chapter 649, Gresham's Choice. The political landscape in Germany was fraught with uncertainty. Yale Fanley had boldly recommended Dumbledore to the International Federation of Wizards, disregarding all opposing views. This move, coupled with the prolonged absence of a minister, had ignited a fierce power struggle. After a tumultuous period, the unworthy contenders were weeded out, leaving only 4 candidates in the fray: Yalefan, Luciford, Gould, and Gresham. Yalefan, as the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, was naturally in a favorable position for the role. Luciford, with his Edgar lineage and support from the Ancient Alliance, was a strong contender. Gould, the deputy minister, seemed like the obvious successor, but his lack of a strong backing hindered his chances. Gresham, with his significant contributions and leadership of the Auror office, emerged as the second most likely candidate. However, the deadlock among the 4 necessitated an external intervention, and Luciford was biding his time, not actively vying for the Minister of Magic position, but rather consolidating his power. At the Edgar estate, a golden thread shimmered into existence, marking the opening of a magical channel. John stepped through, his gaze sweeping over the castle with a mix of admiration and envy. Heinrich truly was born with a silver spoon, he mused, comparing the grandeur of the estate to that of the Malfoys. Adjusting his collar, John approached the heavy oak door and knocked. The door was promptly opened by Edgar's butler, a man who had a history with John, having once driven Heinrich to Durmstrang. Edgar's preference for human servants over house elves was well known, a stance shaped by the tragic history of the House Elf Wars and a deep-seated belief in the dignity of all beings. "Mr. Wick," the butler greeted with respect, "Mr. Luciford has been expecting you." The interior of the castle exuded a Gothic ambiance, reminiscent of a vampire's lair. As John followed the butler through the rain-soaked corridors to the living room, he found Luciford engrossed in a letter. Upon noticing John, Luciford greeted him warmly, setting aside the letter. John, with a light chuckle, remarked on the choice of meeting location, suggesting it was wise to avoid stirring the ministry's suspicions. Luciford agreed, acknowledging Yale fans' cautious stance towards him due to his support for Dumbledore. As they settled into the conversation, John offered his assistance, should Luciford aspire to the ministerial position. However, Luciford dismissed the idea, valuing his influence at Durmstrang too highly to consider such a trade-off. The discussion then turned to the other candidates. Yale fan, being a staunch Dumbledore supporter, was immediately discounted. Gould's mediocrity and vulnerability were seen as disqualifying factors, leaving Gresham as the most viable option. Luciford shared insights into Gresham's tenure as the head of the Auror office, highlighting his proactive measures against the rise of dark wizards in Germany. This period coincided with Voldemort's ascendancy, which had emboldened many dark practitioners. Despite Durmstrang's traditionally lenient stance on dark magic, Gresham's progressive approach and successful crackdown on dark wizards had made him a controversial figure, alienating many influential families. The conversation between John and Luciford painted a complex picture of the political dynamics at play, with Gresham emerging as a candidate of principle and action, albeit one whose past decisions had ruffled feathers across the magical community. In the current political landscape of the magical world, Gresham was poised to become the director of magical law enforcement. "Youth symbolizes hope, doesn't it?" John remarked with a hint of arrogance. "They'll keep quiet." Ludwig found himself in agreement with John. After all, John's faction was now the most powerful. With no familial opposition, only Yalefan and Gould remained significant. Yalefan, having aligned himself with Dumbledore, was inevitably marked. Gould, ambitious and talented, had been content playing a supportive role under Minister Schmidt, acting as a stabilizer among the German magical families. However, with Schmidt's disappearance, Gould aspired for more, a sentiment echoed by his backers. John's intervention, however, meant those aspirations were unlikely to be realized. "I need to see Gresham," John declared, making it clear he wouldn't extend his help without benefiting himself. Ludwig, understanding John's intentions, nodded. "He's on his way." The reason for Gresham's compliance was simple. Ludwig had made it clear that there was no alternative choice. Upon learning his competition had withdrawn, Gresham was eager to confirm the news and curry favor. He was well aware of what Edgar symbolized. As John sipped his first cup of black tea in Edgar's vast castle, he couldn't help but comment on the sparse staffing. "With such a large castle, haven't you considered hiring more housekeepers?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Ludwig, unfazed, replied, "Too much noise." It was clear the apple didn't fall far from the tree in the Ludwig family. By the time the second cup of black tea was poured, the director of the Auror office from the German Ministry of Magic had arrived. "Ludwig, my friend," Gresham announced his presence before being seen. His smile vanished upon entering the room and noticing an unexpected guest. The butler's insincere apology did little to ease his irritation. Gresham recognized something familiar in the man before him, and after a moment, he placed John's face. Ludwig excused himself, leaving John and Gresham alone, the latter wary of the unfolding situation. John observed the Auror office director. This was not the aged Barty, instead, a man in his 30s, dressed in a gray suit, with a demeanor that spoke of promise and caution. "Sit down," John invited casually. "Don't worry, I have no interest in your life." "I don't recall knowing you," Gresham replied, taking a seat with a forward lean that hinted at aggression. John smiled, playing with his ring. "I know you, Edmund Gresham, chief of the Auror office." He leaned forward, adopting a more direct approach. "Let's simplify our conversation. Do you aspire to be the Minister of Magic?" Gresham's reaction was immediate and sharp. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Me?" John pondered briefly before introducing himself in a manner Gresham would find most familiar. "You can call me the Second King, or, if you prefer, Lord Wick." Recognition dawned on Gresham. The face before him had graced many newspaper articles, but the monochrome prints had never done justice to the man's striking appearance. Gazing upon the visage before him, Gresham was taken aback by its youthful appearance, seemingly too young to bear such gravity. In a deep voice, Gresham inquired, "Did Ludwig send you to confront me?" "No," John replied, shaking his head with a meaningful expression. "I'm here to offer my assistance in eliminating him." This statement left Gresham perplexed. John, cutting straight to the heart of the matter, elaborated, "Ludwig is no longer a contender. I aim to support you in becoming the Minister of Magic." "Support the Minister of Magic?" Gresham echoed, skepticism coloring his tone. "Don't you think you're being a bit presumptuous?" John responded with a serene smile, his confidence unwavering. "It's a matter of strength," he explained. "With just a nod from you, Ludwig will be taken care of. Consider it my support." John's proposition, laden with significant implications, left Gresham wrestling with uncertainty. The stakes were high, and the offer was tempting, yet it was the audacity and the promise of power that made Gresham pause to consider the young man's bold plan. Chapter 650. Interference and Participation. Struggling internally for a moment, Gresham finally asked, "What would I have to give up?" "Everything about you," John replied without hesitation. "Once you become the Minister of Magic, you will need to cooperate with me." Gresham laughed coldly. "You think I'm going to be a puppet? It seems you don't know me very well." Indeed, as a hardened Auror who had captured numerous dark wizards, the idea of becoming a puppet was unthinkable to him. John, however, laughed at Gresham's misunderstanding. "I'm not seeking to enslave you, but to collaborate with you," he clarified, sitting across from Gresham. The shadow of the rainy day enveloped him, blending him into the darkness. "I will only seek you out when necessary. You'll remain the Minister of Magic, that won't change. Since I've chosen you, you should realize that I'm not looking for a puppet." John mused. Indeed, someone like Gould would be a more suitable puppet, being foolish, ambitious, and incompetent. Gresham was no fool. He understood this. Yet, he was even more puzzled about John's intentions. "It's quite simple," John said, noticing Gresham's confusion. "I prefer to work with intelligent individuals rather than with someone stubborn who lacks adaptability." Upon mentioning Yalvin, Gresham understood. The rivalry between the first and second kings was no secret. Yalvin, a loyal follower of Dumbledore, would certainly not please John. This revelation gave Gresham a newfound confidence. "Seeking my cooperation to defeat Yalvin?" Gresham's eyes sparkled. "Aren't you worried I'll break our agreement once I become the Minister of Magic?" "You won't," John stated simply. "Destroying you would be far easier." Suddenly, a chill ran from the soles of Gresham's feet to the crown of his head. In the blurry shadows, darkness morphed into tentacles, dragging him towards an abyss. He was ensnared so tightly he couldn't move or breathe, his struggles futile. In the darkness, those vertical pupils watched him silently, witnessing his descent into the abyss with indifference. Just as he was about to be completely consumed, John spoke slowly. "You have a choice." Instantly, the abyss and the tentacles vanished. Only the man who had merged with the darkness remained. Gresham gasped for air, overwhelmed by the terror he had just experienced. He realized that the man before him was not to be trifled with. Destroying the Minister of Magic was indeed easier than becoming one, a terrifying notion that underscored the power of the Second King. "If this is your way, it seems Minister Crouch was also supported by you," Gresham said, laughing at himself. "I used to admire him quite a bit." "Then your admiration was not misplaced," John replied, glancing at Gresham. "He is different from you. He is my friend." "Friend?" Gresham looked up, unable to hide his curiosity. "And what about me?" "You," John smiled slightly. "You need to prove you're strong enough to stand before me." "There will be a day," Gresham declared firmly. "After I become the Minister of Magic," he added with conviction. "I look forward to that day," John said, standing up. He waved his hand, and a golden passage opened. With Gresham watching in astonishment, John stepped through it and vanished. The door opened, and Ludwig entered calmly. "You can go now," he said. Gresham sat on the sofa, frustration evident in his voice. "You summon me with a single word, and suddenly I find myself being supported by Lord Wick. Don't you think an explanation is in order?" "You've already referred to him as Lord Wick. Do you really need an explanation? Ludwig replied evenly. Gresham was left speechless, realizing he had indeed referred to John as Lord Wick subconsciously. After all, facing someone of John's caliber, it was impossible to remain unaffected. After narrowly escaping what felt like being dragged into the abyss, Gresham confronted Ludwig with visible frustration. We're classmates, after all. Don't you think sending me to such a dangerous place could have killed me? I'm not your classmate, Ludwig replied coolly, his tone indifferent. I'm 2 years your senior. This response only fueled Gresham's irritation. So, you think the second king would have me killed? You're not worth his attention, Ludwig stated bluntly. In his eyes, you're not even a threat. Gresham found himself at a loss for words. After a moment of silence, he looked at Ludwig earnestly and asked, Tell me, have I made the right choice? He was referring to his ambition to become the Minister of Magic, contrasting it with his inherently strong personality. He has never been defeated, Ludwig said, his words carrying a weight of certainty. Strength is everything to him. He doesn't hinder the growth of his allies. Once you're strong enough, you'll be considered his friend. Ludwig's explanation did little to soothe Gresham's bruised ego. He rose to leave, acutely aware of his limitations compared to John, who could apparate at will and open portals whenever he pleased. On his way out, curiosity got the better of him, and he asked, Are you his friend or his subordinate? Before their paths diverged, Ludwig and Gresham had been both competitors and friends. Gresham sought some semblance of equilibrium in Ludwig's answer. A sly smile crossed Ludwig's face as he responded, I'm the father of his friend. What do you think? Gresham took a deep breath, his respect for the student president crumbling. He stormed out of the castle, cursing under his breath. From his vantage point in the castle, Ludwig watched Gresham navigate the rain-soaked grounds. Smooth the obstacles, Germany is under control. But where do your ambitions end? He mused, contemplating his son, Johann's potential for greatness. The light of ambition in Edgar seemed to grow ever brighter. The political landscape in Germany was rapidly changing. With Ludwig stepping aside, the third contender in the race threw his support behind Gresham, signaling a significant shift in favor of Durmstrang and the Ancient Alliance backing it. This move effectively silenced any opposition within the pureblood families, who were promptly warned against taking any action by the Ancient Alliance. Gold, feeling the pressure, urged his backers to intervene. However, Ludwig's unexpected withdrawal had left him vulnerable, and the Ancient Alliance's influence was a clear deterrent. The Ancients have forbidden us from acting, the head of a prominent German pureblood family lamented. The Silver Hands Alliance is threatening our interests. This isn't just about you, it affects all of us. The power of the ancient alliances was undeniable. Within days, the German pureblood families found themselves paralyzed, unable to mount a unified resistance. Gold was ousted from the competition, leaving only Yalevon and Gresham in the running. The contest now represented a clash between the old guard and the new, with followers of the first king pitted against those of the second. Yet, the legacy of the first king was marred by disunity, while the second dynasty's momentum seemed unstoppable, a testament to the difference in leadership between John and Dumbledore. John, meanwhile, was at home, leisurely reading the newspaper Basil had brought him. The outcome of the competition between the remaining contenders seemed all but decided. Ludwig's tenure as principal had bolstered his reputation, a stark contrast to Karkaroff's. Dumbledore's mere endorsement had been enough to secure Fudge's election, highlighting the influence wielded by the heads of Europe's 3 largest magical schools. Setting the newspaper aside, John turned his attention to Basil, who had paused his snack to glance at Kiki, busy with her biscuits. You seem to have put on some weight, John observed, half teasing. Basil, momentarily distracted from his dried fish, shot a look at Kiki, who feigned ignorance. The mystery of Basil's sudden weight gain remained unsolved, with Kiki offering no clues, despite the occasional playful swat. The psychological impact of the two, lapse on Long, was profound. Caught off guard, he was overwhelmed by the sudden assault, a sentiment shared by both the fire dragon and the owl, who found the situation equally unacceptable. John, observing the chaos, finally pieced together Basil's intentions, realizing that he viewed the altercation with the owls as a form of post-dinner entertainment. Riddle, with a calculating gaze, positioned himself on a shelf, choosing to remain an observer rather than joining the fray between the two owls. Meanwhile, a little brown bear seized the opportunity to stealthily ascend the shelf, its eyes set on the owl's feathers, ready to make its move. From the shadows of the staircase, Ariana watched the unfolding scene. Her presence was discreet, yet her support for the little bear was unmistakable, silently cheering it on as it prepared to join the chaotic dance of feathers and fur. This tableau of conflict and camaraderie, set against the backdrop of an otherwise ordinary evening, highlighted the complex dynamics at play within this magical world. Each character, from the embattled Long to the scheming Riddle and the supportive Ariana, played their part in a story that was as much about personal trials as it was about the bonds that held them together, for better or worse. Chapters 6 and 51, The Terror of the Second Dynasty, a foregone conclusion. Pierce navigated the corridors of the Ministry of Magic with a purposeful stride. Deputy Minister Thickness greeted Lena, a female employee, with a morning salutation. "Good morning, Lena," Pierce replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he entered the elevator. He subtly blocked an employee attempting to enter, feigning an apologetic tone. "I'm sorry, I'm headed to the minister's office." So, his implication was clear, prompting the employee to retreat hastily. Yet, Pierce lingered, casting a glance at Lena, who had greeted him. Understanding his cue, she exited the elevator with an apologetic look. During the peak work hours, Pierce found himself alone in the elevator, a fact that brought a satisfied smirk to his face. He pressed the button, and the elevator ascended swiftly to the floor, housing the minister's office. With a buoyant step, Pierce approached the minister's office, knocking thrice on the door. "Come in," came the response. Old Barty, the minister, was perusing the day's newspaper, holding it close for a better view. Upon seeing Pierce, he set the paper aside. "Pierce," he acknowledged. "Minister Crouch, I've brought this for you," Pierce said, brandishing the newspaper with a smile. "The Second Dynasty." Old Barty extended his hand, eager. "I haven't gotten to that part yet." Pierce handed over the newspaper, and Barty Sr. scrutinized it with interest. The headline that caught his eye was from the Daily Prophet, announcing Yalevan lost. This news was a delight to Old Barty, who considered himself a pivotal figure in the so-called Second Dynasty. Yalevan's defeat was significant, especially since Yalevan had been an outspoken supporter of Dumbledore at the International Federation of Wizards, making no secret of his allegiance. Old Barty harbored no hatred for Dumbledore, but he certainly didn't hold him in high regard. The first king's dealings with the ministry had been anything but friendly. The ministry's request for Dumbledore to confront Grindelwald had been met with refusal, leading to secretive actions that nearly resulted in Paris's destruction. A debacle that saw the ministry expend considerable resources, only for Dumbledore to receive the accolades. This pattern repeated during Voldemort's reign, with Dumbledore forming his own factions and operating independently of the ministry. Old Barty had once thought that if Dumbledore took over the ministry, he might set aside his ambitions for the ministerial position. However, Dumbledore's consistent refusal to collaborate with the ministry, preferring to operate from Hogwarts, left Old Barty disillusioned. The ministry's efforts against the Death Eaters, juxtaposed with Dumbledore's unilateral actions, highlighted not a refusal to cooperate from the ministry's side, but rather Dumbledore's stubborn independence. Old Barty had long since abandoned any notion of camaraderie with Dumbledore, viewing him as a figure who wielded immense power, yet chose isolation over collaboration, never deigning to offer an explanation. John had aptly described Dumbledore as a deity rather than a mortal, one who remained aloof on his altar. As far as Old Barty was concerned, Dumbledore's existence had little impact on the ministry's decisions or its internal dynamics. Old Barty was content with any role, as long as it didn't involve forming clandestine groups or navigating the complexities of Dumbledore's legacy. In the hearts of many, he may be revered, but he could never supplant the legacy of the Second King. Old Barty continued his perusal of the documents before him. The second article, much like the first, pertained to the Second Dynasty. More precisely, it detailed how the first was influenced by the latter. The sanctions imposed by the Silver Hand Alliance on certain businesses, coupled with warnings from the Old Alliance to German magical families, had directly precipitated social and economic upheaval within the German magical community. Yalefan, caught in the crossfire, found himself compelled to abandon his bid for the position of Minister of Magic. Gresham, stepping into the role of the German Minister of Magic, swiftly addressed the economic turmoil birthed by the Second Dynasty's actions. Seizing the tumultuous moment, he declared an aggressive stance against the Saints, promising rewards for those who reported them. His firm resolve to combat Grindelwald's followers to the bitter end was evident. Despite the contested position of the German Minister of Magic, the Second Dynasty's ambitions did not wane. They expanded their industrial holdings across multiple countries, sowing their influence globally. With the Silver Hand Alliance financing their endeavors and the Ancient Alliance paving their way, these two titans faced little opposition. In less than a week, the Ancient Alliance's funds had dwindled by over half, yet not a single objection was raised among the 28 ancient clans. Their substantial investments promised even more staggering returns in the future, enough to sustain their wealth. As their king aptly put it, interests served both as shackles and links, binding them more closely together. This pursuit of mutual prosperity united the Ancient Alliance as never before, expanding their human network exponentially. In the wake of the Second Dynasty's sweeping influence across the wizarding world, Old Batty realized John's intentions. "Your Excellency Wick has garnered us more supporters," Pierce remarked with evident joy. "The formation of the International Federation of Wizards is now inevitable." However, Old Batty's reaction was tempered with concern. "This move is overly ambitious and risks spiraling out of control," he mused. John's actions had effectively sent a signal to all of Europe, a development that was not entirely positive. He foresaw that some stubborn or radical wizards would not take this lying down and could resort to violent resistance. Such widespread dissent could potentially dilute the Second Dynasty's power, a prospect that troubled Batty deeply. Despite his confidence in John and the Second Dynasty's strength, he was acutely aware that Europe's magical forces were not to be underestimated. Pierce, sensing his apprehension, reassured him. "Minister Crouch, you have yet to witness the full extent of His Excellency Wick's power." John had indeed set the rules of the game, compelling all to comply. The Second Dynasty's maneuvers had not only caused a stir among the common folk, but had also sent shockwaves through the noble families. The sense of a looming threat was palpable among them. Mr. Longbottom found himself embroiled in the acquisition and sale of magical materials, while Mr. Greengrass took charge of the import and export of magical products. Gore and Crabbe made a bold entry into the consumer stationery market. Parkinson ventured into potions, and Edgar took up the antiques business. Malfoy made significant inroads into sports equipment, acquiring 3 professional Quidditch clubs. Diggory introduced snacks with novel flavors to various countries, and the Weasley twins' pranks became a global sensation. Moreover, the Silver Hand Alliance delved into numerous niche markets, including quill pens, demonstrating the Second Dynasty's pervasive influence across Europe. Their strategy of acquisition was clear, and those who resisted were quickly reminded of the ancient family's dominance. The Ministry of Magic found itself powerless, as these families had ties across the entirety of Europe. The Delacour family in France, for instance, made the wine business thrive. Families without a bottle of wine from the Silver Hands were deemed second-rate, highlighting the influence and reach of these powerful alliances. High-end tableware and fresh ingredients became symbols of status, further cementing the Second Dynasty's hold on the wizarding world. Delacour initiated a bold move, decreeing that every operative dispatched by Paris be dubbed Silver Hand. This marked the beginning of the Second Dynasty, causing a ripple of panic among nations. In the grand halls of Silver Hand Manor, John toyed with the reverse-scale talisman, a smirk playing on his lips. "The next step is to activate it," he mused, contemplating the intricate operations of the Second Dynasty. Like a network of tightly interwoven gears, their strategies and actions propelled the colossal machinery of the dynasty forward. The press went into overdrive, chronicling this audacious venture. Ministries of magic worldwide were quick to engage in negotiations, eager for the promises of convenience and favorable commodity prices that Silverhand pledged to offer the common folk. This wasn't an act of selfishness, rather it was a strategic move. With the capability for self-sufficiency in production and sales, Silverhand could significantly reduce costs. John was in a position to wage a price war, potentially slashing the cost of goods by half while still profiting. This tactic was not lost on the astute minds within the Ministries of Magic, who recognized the formidable economic force they were up against. Despite the potential threat, the regularity and fairness of Silverhand's methods left them with no grounds for objection. The European magical community found itself inevitably intertwined with this emerging powerhouse. Compliance and adherence to international regulations made Silverhand an entity too beneficial to resist, with many officials within the ministries finding themselves among the beneficiaries. Lucius took the helm in negotiating with various countries, while Mr. Greengrass was tasked with overseeing transportation logistics. Mr. Greengrass surveyed the 30 soul lamps before him, each representing a large ship capable of complete concealment. This fleet granted him the ability to materialize anywhere at will. Meanwhile, Mr. Longbottom underwent a transformation in the public eye, evolving from a man of modest means to a figure of wealth and influence. Once set into motion, the vast machinery of the Second Dynasty was unstoppable, its influence spreading far and wide, reshaping the landscape of the magical world. Chapter 6 and 52, Surrender and Conquer. Longbottom and Weasley were in a rush. Mr. Weasley had never imagined he would find himself entangled in such significant disputes of interest. The Weasley twins, natural entrepreneurs, were grounded in their business pursuits daily. Even Fred's new wife, Angelina, was tasked with overseeing production. As the head of the second ancient clan and a Ministry of Magic official, Mr. Weasley noticed a shift in how people treated him. Those who once looked down on him now approached with an extra layer of respect. Anyone who used to call him Arthur now addressed him as Director Weasley. Exhausted, Mr. Weasley returned home one day to find only 4 family members remaining: himself, his wife, Ron, and Ginny. Ron was busy planning his own shop, while Ginny had made several unsuccessful attempts to persuade him and herself to train in Quidditch. Arthur? Molly Weasley emerged upon hearing the door, her face falling slightly when she realized it wasn't Fred and George. They won't be here today. By the way, Molly, this is for you, Mr. Weasley said, setting down a bag. Mrs. Weasley, curious, opened it, only to be nearly blinded by the gold inside. She screamed as the bag tipped over, spilling golden galleons across the table and floor, along with a gift box containing gemstone earrings. What is this? Mrs. Weasley stammered. As you can see, money and gifts, Mr. Five, Weasley replied, pointing outside. Ginny's new broom is out there. No, Arthur, I mean, what did you do? Mrs. Weasley asked anxiously. You didn't rob Gringotts, did you? Gringotts, of course not, Mr. Weasley responded, a hint of helplessness in his voice. This is a dividend from the Ancient Alliance. It's essentially a return on investment. When Mr. Goyle had first presented these dividends, Mr. Weasley had reacted just as his wife did now. Mom, what happened? Merlin's beard, Ron and Ginny exclaimed, stopping in their tracks at the sight of the gold. Are we dreaming? Ron asked, bewildered. Ginny, more direct, pinched Ron, confirming their reality with his yelp of pain. They were astounded. The room held at least 5,000 galleons. A significant portion of their investment in the ancient foundation had been returned in one go. Upon hearing about her new broom, Ginny dashed outside, her excitement palpable. The broom, a Nimbus 2001, sparked envy in Ron. Don't you want to open a shop? Take some of the money, Mr. Weasley offered, still in disbelief over their newfound wealth. The Weasley family, once cautious and frugal, was now in a position to be generous. Ron's gaze remained fixed on the gold. The second ancient clan's industry had a clear policy. All services and products offered a discount with the little wizard card. Half price on quills, ink, parchment, hotels, materials, potions, and even the night bus. Anything related to learning was available at half price, including Wolfsbane potion and Ruby potion. Would the Second Dynasty lose money with such discounts? Absolutely not. The little wizard card came with a condition. If it was used for profit, Silverhand reserved the right to cancel the card. Furthermore, half-price products could not be purchased with galleons directly. Instead, galleons had to be loaded onto the little wizard card, converting a large amount of currency into digital numbers on the card. This innovative approach ensured a steady flow of funds while promoting education and access to resources within the wizarding community. The Second Dynasty has devised a strategy that ensures a continuous influx of galleons into its industry chain. Wizards, instead of spending all their points at once, use them in batches. This allows for significant profits when purchasing items at half price, profits that are substantial enough to manufacture 100 more items. The question arises, how can we ensure the integrity of the data on these wizard cards? The answer lies in the world's most skilled alchemists. John has ingeniously embedded magic crystal slices into each wizard card, creating a storage structure that is tamper-proof, except by specific, authorized institutions. This innovation underscores the formidable nature of the Second Dynasty's internal operations. Merchants unable to compete with such low prices have no choice but to either surrender or be conquered. The Ministry of Magic wouldn't dare oppose the Little Wizards Fund's support for John, as doing so would mean antagonizing every wizarding family. The Second Dynasty has thus become an unstoppable force. John harbors even grander ambitions. He aims to expand the reach of the wizard card system until it can effectively replace the galleon. Such a shift would significantly diminish Gringotts' influence, positioning the Second Dynasty as the wizarding world's premier financial institution, akin to a Muggle bank. At the dining table, John watches as Kiki is reluctantly fed a mouthful of salad. He casually reads the newspaper, which is filled with headlines about the Second Dynasty's overwhelming influence. Watson, sipping his milk, admits his confusion about the wizarding world, despite his habit of reading its newspapers. He questions the existence of magic beyond England and the number of wizards worldwide, naively wondering why wizards haven't sought to rule over Muggles. John explains that wizards are vastly outnumbered by Muggles, and that, aside from their magical abilities, they hold no significant advantage. He reminds Watson of his own encounters with wizards, highlighting that knowledge and preparation can level the playing field between Muggles and wizards. Watson reflects on his experiences, realizing that the fear of wizards often stems from the unknown. As the conversation shifts back to the Second Dynasty, Watson jests about its ambitions, unaware that it belongs to John's son. The discussion takes a humorous turn when Ariana explains her rationale for feeding Kiki salad, aiming to improve its meat quality. This leads to a comical misunderstanding, as John discovers Ariana's mistaken belief about Kiki's dietary needs based on a dubious recipe. John is left speechless, realizing the need to educate Ariana about the true nature of owls and the special status of Kiki, not as potential food, but as a cherished companion in the wizarding world. Ariana finally relented, allowing Kiki the dragon to feast on the bacon, albeit from Watson's plate. Watson, having teased the owl, hadn't anticipated his own breakfast becoming part of the spectacle. It was a humorous lesson in humility. Arrogance, it seemed, often led to unexpected consequences. After breakfast, John excused himself from the burgeoning friendship between Watson and Kiki, which seemed to be as delicate as paper, yet intriguingly strong. His responsibilities beckoned him elsewhere, specifically to the intricate dealings of the Second Dynasty. To an outsider, John might have appeared to have a moment of leisure, but in reality, he was engulfed in a whirlwind of tasks. His role was pivotal. He was the linchpin in controlling the overarching situation and facilitating communication between various nations. His efforts, though subtle, were aimed at garnering support for Barty Crouch. Choosing this moment to advance their agenda was strategic, seizing the opportunity to elevate Crouch's reputation. Their collaboration was not merely a partnership, but a confluence of mutual interests. The alliance between John and Crouch was not just about sharing a metaphorical boat, but about being intricately linked in their endeavors. Crouch's brilliance and the leverage provided by the Second Dynasty made their operations smoother and more effective. It was a classic case of mutual benefit. Why indeed would they choose not to pursue it? This intricate dance of politics and power, though hidden behind the scenes, was crucial for the stability and future of their world. John's role, though fraught with challenges, was essential in weaving together the threads of alliances and strategies. Chapter 653, Sweeping Europe, the Second King. Election day is set for September 1st, John mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Indeed, it's an auspicious date. He envisioned candidates and their supporters from across the globe converging for the event, transforming it into a grand celebration. Currently, 2 candidates stood out with the highest chances of being elected: Inji and Old Barty. Inji's reputation as a hero was being leveraged to promote the noble cause of aiding Poland, painting any opposition to this cause as almost sinful. No matter, there's still time to further our cause, John said with a faint smile, confident in their strategy. Since the inception of the Second Dynasty, its momentum had never waned. Both the German and French ministers of magic threw their support behind Barty Sr., aligning the influence of the 3 largest magical schools in Europe. This alliance covered nearly all European wizards, granting them a significant advantage. In any other era, Barty Sr.'s election would have been a foregone conclusion, akin to Dumbledore's seamless ascent to chief wizard. However, Inge's untimely demise had complicated matters, his heroic image persistently challenging Old Barty's candidacy. John drafted a letter and dispatched it to Beauxbatons, aiming to secure Ms. Maxim's support and solidify Old Barty's invincibility. The backing of the 3 schools symbolized the endorsement of centuries of European wizarding heritage. With a casual gesture, John sliced through the air, stepping forward into the void. His reliance on the Flu network had diminished thanks to Zuu's abilities. Upon arriving at Silverhand Manor, he was greeted by Lucius, whose attire had grown increasingly opulent. John motioned for him to take a seat. In the quietude of Silverhand Manor, John inquired about Lucius's visit. Lucius reported on the ancient foundation's recent activities, including the infusion of new funds from various families. "I propose donating half of these funds to the Little Wizard Fund," Lucius stated respectfully, expressing a desire to expand their market reach and further the Second Dynasty's ambitions. John raised an eyebrow at Lucius's report, particularly interested in the status of the 3 Quidditch clubs recently acquired. Lucius assured him of their well-being, despite their decline in recent years. To outsiders, Lucius's focus on Quidditch clubs might seem peculiar, given that materials and potions were more lucrative sectors. However, John knew Lucius was laying the groundwork for a professional league, a vision they shared. Once Barty Sr. assumed the presidency of the International Federation of Wizards, their plan would unfold across Europe, heralding a golden era for Quidditch. Purchasing the clubs now was a strategic move, ensuring they would become invaluable assets when the league commenced. John smiled, appreciating the foresight but cautioned against overreach. The league thrives on competition. Predictable outcomes sap the excitement, he remarked. Lucius quickly grasped John's implication, agreeing that moderation was key. 3 clubs will suffice, he conceded, understanding the importance of maintaining the league's competitive spirit. John's advice was clear. Excessive greed could jeopardize their plans and attract unwanted scrutiny. Lucius pledged to relay this wisdom, ensuring that their collective ambition would not overshadow the integrity of the league. In a world where power could easily corrupt, they aimed to strike a balance, fostering a sustainable future for the Second Dynasty without succumbing to the pitfalls of avarice. As the Second King spoke, a hush fell over the crowd. Despite this, Barty Crouch Sr.'s reputation continued to soar. The article about the Little Wizard Fund resurfaced, garnering even more support. Given John's well-known association with Crouch Sr., it was clear who wielded significant influence within their circle. Wizards worldwide envied the Little Wizard card, a privilege seemingly exclusive to those in countries with a figure like Joe, the Silver Hand. The disparity it would create in the new semester was anticipated with a mix of excitement and dread. At the Ministry of Magic, Pierce couldn't hide his delight at Crouch Sr.'s rising approval. Spotting Percy Weasley passing by, he seized the opportunity to extend an invitation. "Director Percy, would you care to join me for a meal?" he asked. Percy considered the offer before accepting. "It would be my honor, Deputy Minister Thickness." "Please, call me Pierce," he insisted, emphasizing their camaraderie. Pierce was confident in Percy's trajectory towards becoming the director of the International Department of Magical Cooperation and eventually a prime candidate for Minister of Magic. Despite his own position as deputy minister, Pierce acknowledged his slim chances for the top role, lacking both a powerful family backing and the suitable disposition. Thus, he saw Percy as the inevitable choice for the next minister. Percy, understanding the nuances of their political landscape, accepted the lunch invitation as a matter of professional courtesy. During their meal, Pierce inquired about the potential moves of the so-called Second Dynasty. Percy, tactfully vague, suggested that John and Minister Crouch would have their strategies. Pierce, adept at navigating political waters, chose not to press further, focusing instead on introducing Percy to the delights of bouillabaisse, further cementing their alliance. Meanwhile, in France, Fleur Delacour entered the Johnny Silverhand store to a warm welcome from Jin. "Beautiful Miss Delacour, your presence honors us," Jin greeted, his arms wide in a grand gesture. Fleur, amused, replied, "I thought it was time I paid you a visit." As they conversed, Jin hinted at an impending spectacle. No sooner had he mentioned it than chaos erupted outside. Heinrich, wielding his wand, transformed flames into a horse that trampled an assailant, casting the killing curse. Jin and Fleur stepped outside to witness a battle unfolding between the store's security and a group of attackers. Expecto Patronum, Heinrich conjured a Patronus in the form of a white horse, joining the fray. The Patronus deflected a Cruciatus curse aimed at Heinrich, its hooves sending the attacker flying. Heinrich, unfazed, continued to command the flames, herding the assailants into a corner. With a precise flick of his wand, he thwarted an attempt to apparat, leaving the attacker vulnerable. Fleur, not one to stand idly by, leaped into action. Her spells ensnared the fallen attackers, rendering them immobile. The white horse stood guard over Heinrich, while Jin, with a subtle gesture, disarmed another would-be assailant with a flash of red light from his ring. The battle concluded with the attackers subdued and captured, a testament to the prowess and unity of those defending the Johnny Silverhand store. Heinrich approached an individual, his magic wand at the ready. With a flick, he levitated the collar of the man's shirt, revealing the Deathly Hallows symbol tattooed on his neck. Without a moment's hesitation, Heinrich grasped the symbol, tore it off, and tossed it aside. Jin, catching the emblem midair, raised his eyebrows in recognition. "It's them again. Lately someone's been digging for information on Johnny Silverhand, seemingly with plans to act," he remarked. "These are zealots," Heinrich replied, his voice tinged with a cold edge. "Followers of Grindelwald, no less. Their presence in France is peculiar." Jin, leaning in with a sly smile, teased. "Well, if anyone's an expert on those guys, it's you. After all, you're Wang's right-hand man." Heinrich, visibly annoyed, pushed Jin's head away. Fleur, joining the conversation, expressed her concern. "We need to inform John. This news couldn't come at a worse time." "That's precisely why we're still in the game," Jin said, placing his hand on Heinrich's shoulder. "We'll need some veritaserum, or perhaps a master of legilimency." Fu Rong, witnessing their exchange, couldn't help but smile. "As it happens, our king possesses other qualities." A smile briefly crossed Heinrich's lips. Indeed, their king was capable of anything. Meanwhile, as they contemplated sending word to England, John was deep in his own preparations. He was on the verge of completing the 8th magic blood potion. Carefully, he poured a vial of blood, radiating a sacred aura into the concoction. The blood mingled with the red liquid in the test tube, swirling together under John's intense gaze. After days of meticulous experimentation, John had confirmed that the potion would not be rejected by its recipient. In other words, the magic blood had neutralized all potential side effects. As the swirling red mixture came to a rest, an animal form began to emerge within it. This development marked a significant breakthrough, but with the looming threat of Grindelwald's followers, the stakes were higher than ever. Chapter 654, Holy Blood, White Demon King. The once red liquid reformed into the shape of a horse with a single horn, its color shifting from red to a vivid, milky white. It radiated a sense of holiness and was imbued with light. Holding the magical blood in his hands, John pondered. The lore states that forcibly taking the blood of a unicorn brings upon a strong curse. This small amount was traded with Wei Wei, so it should be safe, right? John recalled the dire consequences of drinking unicorn blood from his first year at Hogwarts, feeling a mix of apprehension and reluctance. Nevertheless, he couldn't let it go to waste. As he opened the lid, the milky substance seemed as if it was about to leap out. Without hesitation, John consumed it in one gulp. Light cascaded down his throat, spreading radiantly throughout his body. He felt the familiar surge of magical power coursing through his veins, a sensation he had grown accustomed to. His body emitted waves of magic, causing the roses on the table to bloom rapidly, while the lawn outside alternated between growth and decay. With a light squeeze of his hand, his palm erupted into a fierce darkness, which then transformed into brilliant light. John's entire being seemed to exude sanctity. His hair transformed into a mesmerizing aurora that floated in the air. Levitating off the ground, he resembled a miniature sun, casting light in all directions. The intensity of this light was such that it could blind anyone who dared to gaze directly at it. John was astonished by the transformative power of the unicorn blood, which was unlike any magical backlash he had experienced before. Is this the power of a holy unicorn? He wondered aloud. Unicorns, revered as the darlings of the wizarding world, possess natural beauty, psychic powers, and are considered among the most special of all magical creatures. Their presence is so powerful that even creatures like dementors and boggarts pale in comparison. It's said that other animals will go out of their way to protect a unicorn, underscoring its revered status. As the light gradually receded, John felt an unprecedented lightness, as if his body was devoid of bones. A notification chimed in his mind. Magic blood effect has concluded. You have acquired the blessings of unicorn traits: light, holiness, divine blood, ethereal. Brightness, your affinity for light has improved, granting you the ability to enter a state of light element. Holy, your magic affinity has increased, enhancing your damage against dark magic and creating a holy field that repels curses. Sacred blood, you are now immune to toxins and possess enhanced healing abilities. Ethereal, your mental abilities have been enhanced. Exhaling a breath of white air, John observed his hands slowly becoming translucent, resembling glass under sunlight, with veins that shimmered like optical fibers. He marveled at the contrast between his left hand, radiating holiness, and his right hand, which emitted a dark, ominous aura. These contradictory powers coexisted harmoniously within him, akin to the natural balance between day and night. Floating effortlessly, John realized he had transcended the constraints of gravity. I don't recall unicorns possessing such a mode, he mused, contemplating whether this state was a hidden aspect of unicorns yet to be discovered. The abilities bestowed upon him by the unicorn blood proved immensely beneficial. With a snap of his fingers, a white barrier materialized around him, exuding a warm and comforting sensation. This holy realm not only amplified John's magical prowess, but also shielded him from curses, particularly enhancing the efficacy of white magic like the Patronus charm. The divine blood coursing through his veins rendered him immune to all poisons, his blood now capable of neutralizing toxins. Gazing at his palm, where red blood intertwined with golden threads, John felt a profound transformation. This form resembles that of the White Demon King more than anything human, he reflected, contemplating the profound implication of his newfound powers. John smiled wryly as he conjured a mirror with a flick of his wrist. The reflection showed a figure of unparalleled sanctity, draped in a white robe that could easily pass for that of a wizard's. Taking a couple of deep breaths, John managed to quell the odd sensations bubbling within him. Upon looking into the mirror once more, he noticed his appearance had reverted, albeit with noticeably more delicate skin, a likely gift from the unicorn's magic. Stowing the mirror away, John's attention shifted to the fourth blessing, an enhancement of his psychic abilities. Already proficient in mind magic, he was eager to explore the extent of this newfound enhancement. Activating his psychic abilities, John was immediately bombarded with a cacophony of voices, each clear yet overlapping in a disorienting chorus. He staggered, momentarily overwhelmed, before swiftly dampening his powers to silence the intrusive thoughts. His expression soured. Was that area just now only as big as Surrey? No, it felt larger. After regaining his composure, John cautiously resumed his exploration of his enhanced abilities. Gradually, he expanded the reach of his psychic senses. Initially, he picked up trivial thoughts from his neighbors along Privet Drive, misplaced ties, upcoming school competitions, and dietary preferences of pets. As he pushed his abilities further, the scope of voices widened to encompass the entirety of London, revealing a mosaic of mundane concerns and secrets. However, the sheer volume of thoughts proved too much for John. The incessant noise threatened to overwhelm him, leading him to retract his psychic reach. He realized that without learning to filter out the irrelevant chatter, such extensive use of his abilities would be more of a curse than a blessing. Curious to test the limits of his enhanced powers, John stepped out of the basement and positioned himself by the window, his gaze settling on number 4, Privet Drive, where 2 agents were keeping surveillance. Suddenly, one agent inexplicably slapped the other, much to their mutual confusion. The younger agent, nursing a bruised ego, rationalized the assault as a harsh training method, admiring the supposed ingenuity of his superior. Meanwhile, John, having witnessed the entire scene through his psychic abilities, couldn't help but marvel at the young agent's delusion. It dawned on John that his psychic abilities could potentially manipulate others' actions, a power that seemed even more formidable than the imperious curse. Despite the ethical implications, he couldn't help but acknowledge the unexpected advantage it presented. With a knowing smile, John reflected on the myriad surprises the unicorn's blessing had bestowed upon him, each discovery opening new avenues of possibility. Chapter 655, Azkaban Prisoner, Father and Son. In the dimly lit study of Silverhand Manor, a special guest stood before John, whose wand twirled skillfully between his fingers. His gaze was intense, fixed on the visitor whose silence was betrayed by a clenched fist, signaling an inner turmoil. With a slight, knowing smile, John broke the silence. "Do you wish to see your father? Is this a request, or do you propose an exchange?" The name Theodore caused the wand's motion to halt, revealing the scars of its past battles. At the mention of his name, Theodore's struggle became evident. His fist clenched tighter, unknowingly piercing his palm with a nail. It was clear to all that Theodore Knott was walking a path of isolation. Once a part of the sacred 28 clans, the Knott family had failed to adapt to the changing times and found themselves ostracized. The weight of his family's legacy was a burden Theodore had come to realize he could no longer bear alone. As the last of the ancient purebloods, he was caught between the glory of his Slytherin heritage and the harsh reality of his situation. Slowly he knelt, his pride giving way to desperation. "I beg you, great king," he pleaded, his voice low. "Allow me this final visit to see my father. I understand it means severing our ties." John's response was measured as he raised his wand slightly. "In seeking to reclaim what was lost, you will lose everything," he warned. "I have no regrets," Theodore replied firmly. Acknowledging his resolve, John lowered his wand and instructed, "Go to Nocturne Alley tomorrow. Someone will guide you from there." He then stood, looking down at Theodore, who had demonstrated his loyalty through action, albeit with hesitation. Now, having made his choice between loyalty to a cause and loyalty to his father, Theodore seemed resolved. John held the wand, within which was hidden Lippy's ring, now in the possession of Patty Sr. This ring, John mused, would play a crucial role in the upcoming events. "You may leave." John dismissed him, but as Theodore turned to go, John added, "You are not a good person, Theodore." Theodore paused, and without turning to face him, John continued, "Nor are you a bad one. This will complicate your life. Don't disappoint Pansy. That foolish girl has been waiting for you." Pansy Parkinson had been relentless in her search for Theodore, ever since he had been sent on a mission by John. Despite her lack of cunning, her devotion was sincere. Placing his wand on the desk, John concluded, "The old Knot has been eradicated. The future of the Knot family now rests in your hands." It was clear to Theodore that the restoration of his family's honor depended solely on him. Stepping out of the study, Theodore whispered to himself, "It's time to make a decision, Father." The following day, Theodore made his way to Nocturne Alley, where a Ministry of Magic employee greeted him with a smile. "Mr. Knott, please follow me." They boarded a thestral-drawn carriage, which soared into the sky, leaving the world below swiftly behind. Theodore remained silent throughout the journey, lost in thought. Upon arrival at New Azkaban, the Ministry employee, who served as the caretaker of Azkaban, cautioned him, "Please stay close to me." The new Azkaban was more secure and enchanted than its predecessors, housing Death Eaters and dark wizards who eyed Theodore with curiosity and malice. As Theodore navigated the grim corridors of Azkaban, he knew this visit would mark the end of one chapter of his life and the beginning of another. With vacant expressions, the prisoners watched as newcomers entered. Among them, the so-called Holy 28 were present, yet there were noticeable differences. Within this group, two individuals stood out. Norman greeted Old Goyle, who had not only lost weight during his imprisonment, but had also gained a significant amount. His gaze landed on Theodore, and with a hint of surprise, he exclaimed, "Theodore, I'm your Uncle Goyle." "Uncle Goyle?" Theodore was momentarily taken aback, struggling to reconcile the man before him with the robust figure he remembered. His eyes scrutinized the prisoner's appearance. Despite the apparent lack of substantial difference at first glance, a closer inspection revealed the poor quality of the prisoner's diet. The cell was equipped with basic entertainment like a chessboard and magical chess. "Are you here to see your father?" Old Goyle asked, rubbing his belly and offering an innocent smile. "You must convince him. He's still clinging to the era of Voldemort." "All right, Old Goyle," Norman replied, shaking his head in resignation. "You'll be out soon. Try to lose some weight first." Old Goyle seemed slightly offended, retorting, "Have you seen Crabbe? He's the heaviest among us." Norman was at a loss for words. Indeed, what was there to compare? He couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy for these two. Despite their imprisonment in Azkaban, where most would either perish or come out emaciated, they had managed to gain weight. Their original life sentences had been reduced to 2 years after they decisively renounced Voldemort, not squandering the chance their families had fought for. Now, as their release approached, they were understandably overjoyed. Theodore's heart grew heavy with this realization. Directly approaching John might have doomed his father to an indefinite sentence. After parting ways with Old Goyle, they ventured deeper into Azkaban, a prison divided into 18 levels, with the severity of crimes and the harshness of conditions increasing, the lower one went. A piercing cold emanated from the lowest level, causing Theodore to exhale a visible breath. There, he found his father, Old Knot, in a state of limbo, resembling a living mummy with disheveled hair and muttering to himself incessantly. "I'll wait for you outside," Norman said, noticing the shock in Theodore's eyes before turning to leave. He wasn't concerned about Theodore attempting a prison break. The cell lacked even a single window, with the only source of light being the kerosene lamp Norman had brought. Normally, the prisoners were engulfed in darkness, their fears amplified in the absence of light, driving many to madness. "Father," Theodore approached Old Knot, who recoiled at the sight of the lamp as if the flame could burn him. "The Master will lead the purebloods to rule the world, and we will exterminate all Muggles," Old Knot raved madly. "The Dark Lord will return, and everyone will perish." Laughing hysterically, he continued his delirious rant. Theodore observed his father, thinking to himself, "Even in madness, you obsess over him, giving no thought to your own son." "Child? Ah, yes, the child!" Old Knot seemed to suddenly recognize his visitor, scrambling towards the bars with a skeletal hand. Clutching the fence, he stared at Theodore, insisting, "My son, you must find the Master. He is immortal and will surely return. Then we will dominate the world, and all will be our slaves." Theodore regarded him silently before stating, "Voldemort is dead." "No," Old Knot roared fiercely. "You lie. He is the most powerful wizard, capable of anything." In his fervor, Old Knot threw himself against the unyielding bars. Unleashed and roaring like a beast, he declared, "He will return, and all those who lack loyalty will perish by then." Theodore took a deep breath, a solemn resolve hardening in his gaze as he closed and then reopened his eyes. Any lingering sentiment of familial affection was severed. "I'm here to proclaim," he announced with unwavering conviction, "my king will dominate the world, and the old order will be devoured." Casting one final lingering glance at his father, Theodore set down the lamp he had been holding. "I will restore the Knot legacy to its rightful place, but I will do it my way." With those parting words, Theodore turned to leave, knowing this farewell to his father would be their last. In the dim light, Old Noto's chilling roar echoed as a testament to his fury. Stepping out of the gloomy basement, Theodore was met by Norman, who glanced at his watch. "I expected you to linger longer," Norman remarked casually, lowering his hands as if the moment held no significance. "Just confirming," Theodore replied with a nod, then inquired, "How long will he remain confined?" "Until his death," Norman answered, a smile playing on his lips. "It could be a year, a decade, or even a century. If it were up to me, I'd choose an early death. Eternal imprisonment is a fate worse than death itself. Sometimes death is a mercy, for the longer one lives, the greater the suffering," Theodore mused, eyeing the smile on Norman's face with a hint of disdain. Clearly, Norman was no saint either. "I hope he meets his end within a year," Theodore said, offering a bag of galleons to Norman. "Please. You shouldn't have come to me, but—" Norman pushed the money back, placing his right hand over his heart and bowing slightly with a smile. "My king has commanded me to fulfill your request." Chapter 656, Escape and Evidence in Poland. Gauss, clutching a corpse, cursed vehemently as he sprinted. His tirade was peppered with unsavory remarks about women and crude comments regarding Lippy's anatomy. Skillfully dodging an incoming spell with a swift maneuver, he whipped out his wand and, without glancing back, fired a green light. His pursuers narrowly avoided being hit. With a flick of his wand, Gauss disappeared through apparition. "Don't let him escape," shouted one of the pursuers. They apparated in succession, determined to catch up. Both parties engaged in a frantic chase, appearing and disappearing across various locations. After the fourth apparition, Gauss was panting heavily. He glanced at his arm, noticing a scarlet gash nearly severing it. "Too much apparition. It's overwhelming," he muttered. The wound was severe. Hastily, he retrieved a bottle of Batian and doused the injury, barely managing to avoid reciting a healing spell before his adversaries caught up once more. Despite his injury, Gauss found himself relentlessly pursued. To make matters worse, he was burdened with a corpse. When a red spell came flying towards him, he deftly knocked the assailant unconscious with a counterstrike. However, he was soon overwhelmed by a barrage of attacks. In a desperate move, he used the corpse to shield himself from a lethal curse. The corpse absorbed the impact, sending Gauss tumbling through the air. "Minister Schmidt, you said you'd be more useful dead than alive," Gauss mumbled, dodging a newly formed pitfall. He sprinted towards the forest, and as he entered, the pursuit seemed to halt. Star, leading the Ministry of Magic Aurors, signaled for the team to advance. However, they soon encountered a scream. An Auror was ensnared by animated armor that emerged from the ground, binding him from feet to hands and disarming him. The Auror was left in a restrained, kneeling position, unable to speak. The others fell into various traps set throughout the forest. Star narrowly avoided a wooden construct, dismissing it with a spell. "Silverhand's work," he scoffed, dispelling the traps with a wave of his wand. Casting Lumos Maxima, he illuminated the night, revealing hidden traps. Despite clearing the obstacles, Gauss had vanished. Star attempted to track Gauss using magic, but found all traces erased. It was clear Gauss was responsible. With no leads, Star and his team withdrew. "Collect all Silverhand devices. I want answers from Johnny Silverhand," Star commanded, planning to confront the craftsman. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, a small boat submerged at the river's bottom began to surface. Gauss lay in the boat beside the corpse, spitting out water. "Mr. Minister, you've proven to be invaluable," he remarked, despite the body's advanced decomposition. "After all my searching, it seems you're my only lead." Weakly waving his wand, Gauss directed the boat towards his residence, leaving the scene behind. At Johnny Silverhand's shop, Star arrived, furious, with the confiscated devices. Tang Mi, sitting leisurely, looked up. "Mr. Rosier, what brings you here with such urgency?" "You dare play ignorant?" Star sneered. "You've been aiding the enemy, supplying them with Silverhand devices." Tang Mi feigned surprise. "Really? I wasn't aware. Has the ministry been breached again?" "I thought the ministry's anti-apparition measures were foolproof," he added innocently. Star's smile was devoid of humor. "This isn't about apparition. Someone has stolen Grindelwald's." Inside the dimly lit room, Star confronted Tang Mi with a mix of frustration and disbelief. "That's really strange," Star remarked, his patience wearing thin. "Stop pretending," Star said dismissively, signaling his team to set down the props. "These are all from your organization, Silverhand." Tang Mi shook his head, feigning pity. That's really unfortunate. You have suffered a lot, haven't you? So you're not going to explain? Star pressed. What is there to explain? Tang Mi responded with a shrug. These aren't from us. Star almost laughed at the absurdity. It's a joke. Besides Silverhand, who else would have Silverhand props? Yes, I have, Tang Mi replied, his tone serious. The last time Silverhand was robbed, a batch of Z-Series goods went missing. I believe I've reported this to the Ministry of Magic. He rummaged through his papers and triumphantly presented a list. Duara stole Silverhand products and used them against the Ministry of Magic. Truly despicable. Star's expression darkened as he glanced over the inventory, realizing the items matched those he had encountered. It was clear Tang Mi was telling the truth. Oh, I almost forgot. That's your hero, Tang Mi said with a sly smile. Always full of surprises, isn't he? Feeling outmaneuvered, Star turned and led his team away. Once they were gone, Lippy emerged from the shadows. You've really learned a lot from the Second King, Lippy observed. Tang Mi, once a reckless fighter, was now adept at playing political games. Tang Mi glanced back at Lippy. Take off your mask. It's unsettling every time I see it. Lippy shrugged and removed the mask, revealing the need for padding to mimic another's appearance accurately. What's our next move? Tang Mi asked, his spirits lifted by his friend's survival. My status here is deceased, Lippy said with a grin. But this time, I'll make a significant impact. He produced a pamphlet listing individuals who had been compromised. I need your help to transport a body out. This is the evidence we need to expose the truth. Tang Mi nodded. The Ministry of Magic monitors all flu networks, but we have our own. Their independent network was Silverhand's secret to evading surveillance. Lippy, having no other options, ventured into the black market to retrieve Schmidt's body. Along with the collected list, this evidence would tarnish Yinga's reputation. In the dead of night, Gauss arrived at Silverhand with the corpse. The Aurors stationed outside were neutralized by Silverhand's security, a reminder of the organization's military prowess. Inside, near the underground fireplace, 2 infiltrators were bound and gagged. Gauss, motivated by the promise of 5,000 galleons, effortlessly carried the heavy corpse. The election is approaching, and will release this evidence for all to see, Lippy told Tang Mi, envisioning his rise to a high-ranking position. Next time we meet, drinks are on me. A couple? Tang Mi asked, puzzled. Lippy smirked. Did you think I wouldn't find out? My office is next to Ozzy's. Caught off guard, Tang Mi could only smile awkwardly. All right, I'll be the godfather to your children, experiencing the joy of being looked after, Lippy joked before stepping into the fireplace, disappearing in a swirl of blue flames. Gauss followed, eager for his reward. Tang Mi, left alone, muttered to himself with a resigned smile. Godfather? As Tang Mi pondered the future, a thought crossed his mind about when he and Ozzy could start a family. However, he quickly shifted his focus to the present, realizing that before any thoughts of children, a proper wedding was essential. Living together had been a step in their relationship, but a formal celebration of their union was still missing. His thoughts were momentarily interrupted as he glanced at the 2 individuals bound next to him. With a stern tone, he reminded them, "You must keep this a secret." Eager to stir the pot in Poland, he mused, "Let's make things interesting here." The transformation of a hero into a traitor would certainly captivate the Polish audience. Without delay, Tang Mi reached out to the newspaper under Yinsho's control. It wasn't long before the news of the day's events at the Polish Ministry of Magic dominated the headlines. However, the uproar wasn't solely focused on the ministry itself, but also on the mysterious appearance of Silverhand products in the market. The public quickly connected the dots to the previously missing Silverhand shipment. The Polish citizens, who had once rallied behind the cry of "Return the Hero," now turned their backs, hurling insults and condemning Duara's actions as the height of shamelessness. Duara, once celebrated as a hero, was now vilified and branded a disgrace. The statue that had been erected in his honor in the central square was demolished in a public display of contempt. Tang Mi observed these developments with a sense of irony. He didn't need to lift a finger to tarnish the reputation of a hero. The public, fickle and quick to judge, had done the work for him. It was a stark reminder of how quickly people could turn, How the same voices that once demanded justice and hailed heroes were now the ones leading the charge in condemnation. Chapter 657. Zoli's Welfare Home. In the heart of London, nestled among the forgotten structures, stood an abandoned house. It had been years since anyone called it home, leaving it to the mercy of dust, rats, and insects. Within its desolate confines, a blue flame spontaneously ignited in the fireplace, heralding the arrival of two figures. The cramped space of the hearth expelled a corpse before Gauss and Lippy emerged. "Mission completed," Gauss declared, turning to Lippy with a professional air. He preferred to settle financial matters only when they were safely away from prying eyes. Lippy's expression darkened under Gauss's scrutiny. "I'll give it to you tomorrow," he said, avoiding Gauss's gaze. "Tomorrow?" Gauss's patience waned, his voice laced with irritation. "Payment is due upon completion of the task." Lippy sighed, offering a blood-stained blade to Gauss. "Consider this in advance, and because I respect my boss, I'll let you have this as well. Consider it interest." Before Lippy could enjoy a much-needed cigarette, Gauss snatched it from his grasp. Lippy stared at his empty hand, a mix of frustration and resignation in his eyes. "At least leave one for me," he murmured. It had been months since his last smoke. Gauss, unimpressed, demanded, 100 galleons. "Are you trying to rob me?" Lippy retorted, anger flaring. Gauss pocketed the cigarette, seemingly indifferent. "Take it or leave it." 100 galleons, Lippy conceded begrudgingly. "We'll settle everything tomorrow." With a smirk, Gauss offered a cigarette. Lippy, reminding himself of the importance of their partnership, accepted it with shaky hands. Just as he was about to light it, a drop of rain hit his nose. They looked up simultaneously to find a gaping hole in the ceiling, through which rain began to pour silently. Lippy pocketed the cigarette just as the downpour intensified, soaking them both. Gauss, with a stoic expression, stated, "Let's get one thing straight. We don't accept returns." Lippy could barely contain his frustration. Using a spell, he levitated the corpse and followed Gauss outside. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Home," Gauss replied, looking around before bracing against the cold. Lippy nodded, his own plans to find Batty Sr. lingering in his mind as they went their separate ways. Gauss, alone in the rain, reflected on his financial woes but shrugged them off. Unlike others who sought shelter, he walked leisurely through the downpour, embracing the solitude of the night. Upon reaching Zoli's welfare home, Gauss was greeted by an elderly woman. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with caution. Stepping under the eaves, Gauss removed his hat. "Oh God, it's you," the woman exclaimed, recognizing him. "Gauss Ultramar. Do you still remember me?" Gauss asked, genuinely surprised. "Of course. I remember you. You were the most well-behaved child here," Mrs. May replied warmly, inviting him inside. She expressed concern over his lack of an umbrella, reminiscent of the scoldings he received as a child for getting caught in the rain. Gauss stepped into the orphanage, a place that had once been his home. Abandoned outside a monastery as a baby, he was brought to Zoli's welfare home, unaware of his magical heritage until he turned 11. Mrs. May, ever the caring guardian, treated every child with kindness, despite the orphanage's limited resources. The children here, often abandoned and overlooked, found a semblance of family within its walls. In an orphanage known for taking in children with disabilities, children who were often overlooked and deemed unadoptable by other institutions found a haven. Among them was Gauss, a child whose accidental displays of magic had branded him as a harbinger of bad omens in the eyes of the monastery that initially took him in. After a failed exorcism attempt, he found himself tied up, only to escape and be found by Mrs. May, who offered him a new home. Reflecting on his past, Gauss fondly remembered the quirks of his fellow orphans, like Xiao who used to wet the bed, and Dunbar, who was missing teeth. His reminiscence was abruptly cut short by Mrs. May's somber news. Dunbar had taken his own life. The orphanage was teetering on the brink of financial ruin, struggling to provide for the children. Dunbar, in an attempt to alleviate the orphanage's burdens, had joined the circus, but the strain proved too much for him. Mrs. May lamented that a recent donation had come too late to make a difference. Gauss, overwhelmed by a sense of guilt and helplessness, could only mutter about the tragic timing. Mrs. May, concerned for Gauss's well-being, inquired about his current life. Gauss reassured her, mentioning he now had a job and a family, which pleasantly surprised Mrs. Mai. She had always worried about his tendency to isolate himself as a child. Leaving the orphanage behind, Gauss ventured into Scorpion Tail Alley, stopping in front of a familiar black door at number 78 Shiwei Lane. After a moment of hesitation, he knocked. The door was opened by a woman with short hair, who, upon seeing Gauss, slapped him twice in quick succession. The slaps were a release of pent-up emotions. She had thought him dead, especially after an unexpected sum of money had arrived. Gauss explained he too had believed his end was near, but somehow survived. The mention of Lippia, his sister and the woman's wife, ignited further anger. Lippia had died in an explosion on the day their child, Emilia, was born, an event the woman blamed on Gauss. Despite the tension, Gauss's plea to see his niece softened the woman's heart. Stepping into the house, Gauss moved cautiously, his heart heavy with the weight of past mistakes and the longing to connect with the only family he had left. Gently, he opened the door just a crack and caught sight of her, his daughter. She bore a striking resemblance to her mother, yet her eyes mirrored his own. That brief glance was all he allowed himself before quietly closing the door. Turning to the girl's aunt, he expressed his gratitude with a simple, "Thank you." As he made to leave, Jura called out to him, urging him to pause. Her voice carried a softness as she grasped his hand. "Have you truly made enough to walk away, or is it that you cannot bear the risk?" she asked. "Think about Emilia. Think about what you're leaving behind." Gauss responded, a hint of sorrow in his tone. "There are still things I must attend to. You know as well as I do that someone with my history cannot afford the luxury of a family life." He offered Jura a look of sincere gratitude. "I can't express how thankful I am to you, Jura, for taking care of my daughter, but I cannot, in good conscience, endanger her with my presence." Jura's response was halted, the word "I" left unspoken. Her affection for him was palpable, yet it manifested in the decisive action of closing the door firmly behind him. On the other side, tears welled in Jura's eyes. Leaning against the door, she whispered to herself, "You never saw me. Is it because I'm always one step behind your sister?" With that, Gauss departed. He was a fugitive, a man living on the edge, but above all, he was a father. The stains of his past, the blood on his hands, were burdens he refused to let his daughter bear. Chapter 58, The Election Begins, The Origin of Magic. John opened a bottle of soda, catching the immediate attention of Ariana, who was lounging on the sofa engrossed in a television show. She fixed her gaze on him, anticipation evident in her eyes. However, John, holding the soda, met her gaze and firmly stated, "No, you've already had 3 bottles today." Ariana's face fell into a pout. Ever since Watson discovered her fondness for soda, it seemed as though he had relocated the entire stock of a nearby shopping mall to their home. This led to Ariana indulging in the fizzy drink far more than was advisable. Consequently, the Wick family convened their first-ever meeting to discuss soda consumption. The outcome, with a surprising vote of 2 against and 6 in favor, was a decision to limit Ariana's daily soda intake. Watson, who also opposed the motion, found his own allowance restricted to 3 bottles. One might wonder how the Wick family arrived at 8 votes. John explained that even the owls and dogs were granted voting rights, much to Ariana's dismay. John's thoughts were interrupted by memories of a conversation with old Barty. He was astonished by Lippy's audacity to investigate a corpse and confront the Polish Ministry of Magic with just a ring as evidence. Barty Sr. plans to unveil this conspiracy during the election, John mused, a hint of skepticism in his tone. It all seemed too straightforward, and his instincts warned him of underlying complications. "I'll advise old Barty to proceed with caution," he decided, setting aside his soda to step through a magical passage. No sooner had John left than Ariana's gaze shifted to the refrigerator. Her bear toy, seemingly acting on its own, nudged the fridge door open. "It's the bear's doing, not mine," Ariana declared innocently, though she knew any secret indulgence would be immediately noticed due to the numbered soda bottles. With a sigh, she closed the fridge and turned back to the TV, only to see her father, Watson, sneaking in. Watson, tiptoeing and whispering, inquired about the whereabouts of the rest of the family. Upon learning they were alone, he revealed a box chilled with ice cubes and filled with various flavors of soda. A soda party, he announced with a grin, declaring a day free from restrictions. However, they had overlooked the silent witnesses to their mischief, 2 owls and a dog, observing Watson's actions with disapproval. Meanwhile, at Silverhand Manor, John was drafting a letter to Barty Sr., urging caution and suggesting the accompaniment of a star apprentice for added security. After sending the letter with Riddle, his trusted owl, John turned his attention to Theodore, who stood below him in the manor. Theodore, with a tone of respect, declared his decision to follow John and assume the mantle of the new knot, following the demise of his father in Azkaban. John, having monitored Theodore's actions, was not surprised by this declaration. Theodore's choice to end his father's perpetual imprisonment was seen as an act of mercy, a decision that marked both the end of the old knot and the beginning of a new allegiance under John's guidance. "This election, Barty Sr. will attend, and you will accompany him," John stated with a light tone. "It's crucial for you to become acquainted with all of this. The challenges you'll face in the future are far more serious than any Hogwarts school play." "I understand," Theodore nodded, his expression serious. "From this moment on, you are a star apprentice," John continued, pacing slowly. "You have much to learn from those around you, how to wield the killing curse, the art of torture, the subtleties of infiltration, and the strategies for escape." He paused in front of Theodore, gazing into the eyes of his former friend. "You will find yourself struggling in the mud. You must choose, either sink and drown or break free and transform. The person you are now cannot uphold the future of the Knot family," John declared, placing a hand on Theodore's shoulder. "Blood and fire will forge you into a leader worthy of our lineage. Do you remember our motto?" "For eternal glory," Theodore replied, a fervent gleam in his eyes. "Yes, for eternal glory." At the end of year feast during their first year, a young and naive Wong had raised his glass among the Slytherins, proclaiming that very motto. And so glory became a snare that Slytherin could not escape, a relentless pursuit of power and prestige. Theodore, too, was a believer in this cause. Like Voldemort before him, John's disciples had spread across the entire wizarding world. For Theodore, the pursuit of glory was not just about personal ambition, it was about restoring the honor of the Knot family, a cause for which he was willing to sacrifice everything. "The election is about to commence," John remarked, turning his gaze towards the meticulously maintained garden. The gardener was diligently tending to the plants. Little Barty, once distant and reserved, seemed to be warming up. Perhaps it was Barty Sr.'s patient display of fatherly affection, or maybe it was the realization that Barty Sr. did not rely on the facade of being a heroic father. Barty Jr. had begun to seek out the fatherly love he had longed for, despite claiming to still harbor resentment. Yet he now referred to him as father. The past rebellion might have been a response to his father's neglect, but the softened demeanor of the elder Barty suggested a chance for reconciliation. John approached Barty Jr., observing his adeptness with the gardening tools. "You're getting used to it," he noted. "Sometimes it's still a bit inconvenient," little Barty admitted, pausing in his work. "Your father, you're getting used to his presence," John observed. Little Barty was at a loss for words, focusing instead on weeding. "Find an opportunity to talk to him," John suggested. "It would mean more to him than any title or position, even that of the president of the International Federation of Wizards." Met with silence, John chose not to press further and departed. Little Barty set down his shovel, gazing up at the sky. "The weather is so nice today," he mused to himself. During his time at the Crouch household, he rarely had the opportunity to appreciate such a view, a stark contrast to the open skies he remembered from the Quidditch pitch. The election was set to take place at the birthplace of magic. In the distance, towering green hills reached towards the heavens, their peaks nearly brushing the sky. A grand staircase led upwards, culminating in a majestic castle shrouded in clouds and mist. A solitary figure approached, his eyes fixed on the ancient stronghold. This was the site of the first generation of Dark Lord's downfall. And now, he was here to tread the same ground once more. Ing reached out, his fingers brushing against the weathered stones, feeling the weight of history beneath his touch. Chapter 659, The Kingdom of Bhutan and the Theft of Muggle Weapons. Nestled high in the eastern Himalayas lies the Kingdom of Bhutan, a country renowned for its unparalleled beauty. It is a cradle of significant magics and a sanctuary for devout wizards and believers alike. This sacred place in the wizarding world is where pivotal decisions are made, such as the election of the new president for the International Federation of Wizards. Supporters of the contenders gather here, marching along the stone and log paths, in a scene that, while lively, radiates harmony rather than chaos. Among the attendees was Barty Crouch Sr., whose arrival was met with enthusiastic cheers from his supporters. Breaking away from his usual stern demeanor, he waved back at the crowd with a friendly gesture. Pierce, standing by his side, wore a smile, remarking, "To think I would be protecting the Minister of Magic in my old days." From a wooden balcony, Oxer, clad in a trench coat and cowboy hat, observed the scene with a hint of displeasure. "It's just you and me, the wood, acting together," he muttered to the silent execution platform beside him. Oxer's loyalty to Minister Crouch's potential presidency was clear, despite his grumblings. "Minister Crouch becoming the new president is beneficial for your lord," the execution platform reminded him, emphasizing the importance of their lord's influence on their presence there. Oxer, known for his notorious reputation, expressed his unwavering loyalty. "I will give my life if necessary." His admiration for strength and the meaning it brought to his life was evident, a sentiment echoed by the execution platform. They, along with the Star Disciples, a group of infamous criminals each responsible for numerous deaths, sought a power that could change the world, a vision they saw realized in John. As Barty Crouch Sr. ascended the steps, Oxer's attention shifted to a task at hand, instructing the execution platform to take care of that little guy and to deal with those wizards lurking in the streets. The mission weighed heavily on them, contributing to Oxer's dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, Theodore observed the crowd, pondering the world John had introduced him to, a world far removed from the safety of Hogwarts, filled with danger and betrayal. Despite the risks, Theodore found himself exhilarated by the challenges, his heart racing with anticipation. The trials he faced with the Star Apprentice had transformed him, aligning with John's belief that such experiences would hasten his growth into a worthy knot. The election was set to begin the following day, and the early arrival of the candidates facilitated the planning of subsequent matters. The contenders, Barty Crouch, Inge Griffiths, Jing Zhang, and Odom Tick, convened beneath the castle, exchanging greetings with the veneer of old friends. Despite their outward camaraderie, each harbored their own ambitions. Odom, a wizard of considerable influence and support, was not the current president of the American Congress, but his presence among the candidates was noteworthy. Jing Zhang, on the other hand, brought his own unique perspective to the gathering, setting the stage for a highly anticipated election. A middle-aged witch, dignified and elegant, stood with impeccable posture and etiquette. Her oriental grace added to her charm. "Long time no see, Odom," Barty Sr. greeted, extending his hand with a nostalgic smile. Odom, in return, shook his hand vigorously, his laughter booming. "I thought you'd forget me," he said. Odom, a Thunderbird College graduate from Ilvermorny, had spent a semester at Hogwarts as an exchange student during Barty Sr.'s tenure as the student council president. Although decades had passed and life had taken them in different directions, reducing their contact, the warmth of their reunion was palpable. "Pleased to meet you," Jing Zhang said with a nod. "Miss Zhang," Barty Sr. acknowledged with a nod of his own. His gaze then shifted to the last person in the group, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Hello, Crouch," Inger greeted, Ed with a slight smile. "I believe this isn't our first meeting," Barty Sr. responded, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Their last encounter in Poland had been anything but pleasant, marred by underlying tensions and revealed truths. The man before him was none other than Grindelwald, a fact that made Barty Sr.'s disdain all the more evident. Yet the era of Grindelwald's reign was long gone, a fact Barty Sr. couldn't help but sneer at internally. "Enjoy your day, Mr. Griffith," Barty Sr. said, his tone laced with unspoken animosity. Inger, unfazed by Barty's malice, simply smiled. "I intend to, and I wish you the same, Crouch." The air was charged with their rivalry, a silent battle of wills and wits. John had chosen not to travel to Bhutan for the campaign for several reasons. The Ministry of Magic had evolved, introducing an Auror training program that equipped its graduates with advanced gear, significantly enhancing their combat capabilities. Moreover, John had his own matters to attend to, especially with the election looming. The political landscape was as fraught as any battlefield, and John was deeply involved in negotiations to secure benefits for the Second Dynasty, ensuring its financial stability. After Tongmi's departure to Poland, the responsibility fell solely on John. He had just dealt with a saint who had attempted to manipulate the election through identity fraud. Despite his unique ability to sense danger, a gift from his Zhou bloodline, John felt an unsettling sense of unease he couldn't pinpoint, which only added to his frustration. Even Grindelwald couldn't escape the Aurors, John mused, considering the combined forces of British and international Aurors gathered in Bhutan. Yet, something didn't sit right with him. Leaving Silverhand Manor, John found himself in the basement, staring at the blue flames before making his way upstairs. "Watson, I expect no deceit from you," he said, pausing momentarily. In Watson's living room, Makoff's demeanor had changed significantly from their previous encounters. Gone was the contempt, replaced with caution as he fixed his gaze on Watson. Watson, nursing a headache, sighed. "Mr. Makoff, you could at least explain what's going on instead of immediately accusing me," he said. Watson had been looking forward to a rare day off, planning a soda carnival of sorts, but his plans were abruptly interrupted by Makoff's unexpected visit. As soon as Makoff had arrived, he made it clear he wasn't there for pleasantries, leaving Watson bewildered. "You don't know?" Makoff asked, his tone implying a mix of surprise and concern. Mycroft's expression turned to one of surprise. "What do I know?" he asked, scrutinizing Watson's expression intently. If Watson was acting, then his skills surpassed those of an Oscar-winning actor. "Someone has breached the defense base," Mycroft revealed, laying out information that was never meant for public eyes. "A significant number of lethal weapons have been stolen. But there's something even more troubling," he continued, straightening in his seat to emphasize the gravity of the situation. "We're not the only ones affected." Watson sifted through the file until he found a photograph. It depicted a wall, but with a notable difference. A large hole melted through it by an extremely high temperature. The specifics of how many were involved or how they managed to infiltrate the defense base remained unclear. The only lead was the technology used to create the breach. Mycroft's thoughts immediately turned to Watson, considering the possibility that the adversary possessed a weapon capable of vaporizing the human body instantly with high heat. Chapter 660, Old Baddie's Courage and the Fight. The person most likely capable of orchestrating such a feat, the disappearance of a vast array of weapons, was thought to be the underground president. Mycroft scrutinized Watson's every expression, his voice deep and grave as he spoke. The vanishing of numerous weapons could incite global panic. These arms are potent enough to obliterate a small nation. Pausing for a moment, Mycroft inhaled deeply before continuing in a steady tone. "There's another concern. We cannot ascertain if any nuclear weapons are among the missing arsenal. It's not just Britain that's affected. Other nations are involved too. This includes countries with nuclear capabilities, but MI6 is currently unable to confirm the presence of nuclear arms among the lost weaponry. Given the secretive nature of these matters, the intelligence agencies worldwide are not easily outwitted. I need you to disclose the location of these weapons, Watson." If Watson wasn't directly involved, Mycroft expected him to assume responsibility regardless. "Someone must be accountable and bear the brunt of the fallout," Mycroft stated. "You're aware that my suspicions of you are not unfounded." The leaders of the major underground factions sometimes required a scapegoat to take the blame. Watson understood this all too well. He perused the documents before him, sinking into a prolonged silence. Those individuals lacked the capability to infiltrate a defense base and abscond with missiles. Even Bond couldn't achieve that. Watson finally spoke, his voice deep and resolute. "Infiltration might be feasible, but transporting the weapons would necessitate a significant force. No underground faction could manage such a feat." Mycroft then inquired, "What about you?" "Me?" Watson was momentarily taken aback, having believed himself unrelated to the matter. Before Mycroft's arrival, he had been contemplating a far more mundane activity, Don't feign ignorance, Watson, Mycroft pressed, his gaze piercing. You possess the means, considering the explosion at the Tower of London. Watson found himself at a loss for words. He couldn't possibly admit that his son was involved. I'm merely a conduit between them, Watson demurred. Destroying a city might be within my power if I were so inclined, but a defense base would go unnoticed unless one could control the entire facility or bribe its personnel. The more Watson spoke, the more he realized the gravity of his words. Mycroft observed him silently, prompting him to continue. Clearing his throat awkwardly, Watson conceded, Regardless, I lack the means. Moreover, I'm no terrorist. Why would I desire such armaments? I recall your investment in a weapons company in the United States, Mycroft interjected, an eyebrow raised. Hammer Industries, was it not? That was Olaf's doing. I merely... Watson began. Enough, Watson, Mycroft interrupted, standing. I have no wish to see those missiles, marked with the National Defense Base's logo, detonated within our borders. With that, Mycroft departed. Watson's guilt remained unproven, yet the suspicion had not entirely dissipated. Watson was correct. The underground president would not undertake such an operation without abducting the defense base's head. The facility employed the most sophisticated defense systems, requiring multiple forms of manual identification, including fingerprints and iris scans, with full access rights reserved solely for the head. The intruder's choice to force entry indicated a lack of comprehensive access. Nonetheless, Mycroft's intention was to pressure Watson into conducting a thorough investigation. This stance also served to remind Watson of the powerful allies at his disposal. As Mycroft left, Watson silently reviewed the documents once more. John emerged, observing the pedestrians gradually reappearing outside. Weapons stolen? He mused, narrowing his eyes. Infiltrating the defense base would pose little challenge to him. Contemplating Mycroft's veiled threat, John offered, I can handle. There's no need, Watson replied, setting aside the information. Watson sighed, a hint of frustration in his voice. I have a solution, but it won't be easy to implement. As the underground president, Watson possessed intelligence capabilities rivaling those of the National Security Department. He had a short list of capable individuals in mind. Olaf, you've really put me in a difficult position, Watson lamented, regretting his decision to follow the King of War's advice and invest in Hammer Industries. Ariana descended the stairs, clutching a bear in her arms. She cast a glance at Watson, and a fleeting shadow of darkness flickered in her eyes. The night was eerily calm, like the quiet before a storm. Old Batty stood over a corpse, his expression unreadable. Lippy explained. The ring from the Schmidt family must have been deliberately ingested by Bart Schmidt in his final moments. He continued, the ring not only signifies Schmidt's identity, but also contains magic that can only be wielded by those of Schmidt's bloodline. Reflecting on Lippy's words, Old Batty mused, Muggles possess powers that surpass those of wizards. He found it hard to believe that without magic, people could transform into someone else entirely. The corpse Lippy had brought was encased in a crystal coffin. Despite the circumstances, it remained relatively intact, allowing Old Batty to observe the gruesome wounds that seemed to have expanded from within. Muggles may lack magic, but their technology is a terror far beyond what magic can achieve, Old Batty remarked. Grindelwald, you're leading magic into an abyss, he declared, aware of Grindelwald's intentions to wage war against the Muggle world. This was no secret, yet the current state of Muggle technology and weaponry was not something the wizarding world could easily confront. Some wizards, blinded by arrogance, longed for the glory days of the past, underestimating Muggles as they might have a millennium ago. This was a grave mistake. Even back then, Muggles nearly eradicated the wizarding community. The Ministry of Magic strictly enforced the Statute of Secrecy, not to protect Muggles, but to safeguard wizards themselves. Being discovered by Muggles would mark them as outliers, facing uncertain fates. The way wizards dealt with werewolves could very well mirror how Muggles would treat wizards, driven by the same human nature that incites conflict over differences as trivial as skin color. Tomorrow, we will bring all of this to light, Old Batty resolved, ordering the Aurors to monitor and apprehend Grindelwald's followers. Many have arrived, and there are others still hidden, he added gravely, emphasizing the urgency of neutralizing this threat in its early stages. If we encounter any resistance, he paused, his eyes reopening with unwavering determination, eliminate them on sight. As Minister for Magic, Barty Crouch Sr. was no stranger to making tough decisions. Though acting on this intelligence before it became public knowledge might tarnish his reputation, he was prepared to face the consequences. The imminent threat posed by Grindelwald's conspiracy demanded sacrifices for the greater good of the wizarding world. "Do you need our help?" Oxer stepped forward, his respect for the decisive Barty growing. "Our mission as star apprentices is to ensure Mr. Crouch's safety against these threats," he added with a sneer. Theodore clenched his fists, ready for action. Barty did not decline the offer. He rallied the Aurors and Astrologers, a formidable force of 40 in total. "I will win this election and expose Grindelwald's conspiracy," Barty declared, addressing his assembled team. "This battle is necessary for our survival and for the stability of the magical society. Tonight's battle will be challenging, but tomorrow we will have made the world a safer place," he stated solemnly. "Let's take action and dismantle this conspiracy. We must ensure the election proceeds without interference." With the order given, the Aurors sprang into action. "Let's go. Rue, Kai," Oxer said to Theodore, who took a deep breath and stepped out the door, leaving only Lippy and Pierce behind. Barty Sr. remained at his side, pondering the upcoming election. "What form will the election take this year?" he mused. The method of selecting the president for the International Union of Wizards was never set in stone. In the past, unicorns had been employed for this purpose, a method widely regarded as the epitome of fairness. However, this tradition was marred when Grindelwald turned a unicorn into a corpse, casting a shadow over its use. Given the rarity of unicorns, found primarily in the East, not every election could feature one. In the last election of the International Federation of Wizards, a unicorn was notably absent. Yet, Dumbledore's overwhelming reputation eclipsed all else, securing his position as the new president of the Federation. As the next election loomed, Barty Sr. speculated that it might hinge on approval ratings. He was poised to face Grindelwald in a fierce competition, with the victory likely to be a close contest between them. This wasn't to say that the other candidates stood no chance, but during this period, Barty Sr. and Grindelwald were the most prominent voices, capturing the attention and speculation of all involved.